Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. The young man looks at his hands. He says in shock that he is here again, and he is very sad about it. Smoke rises from the destroyed buildings. The guy thinks that Smoke Sky Island is in front of him. Destroyed buildings are visible around the young man. He has the impression that life has never existed here. Somewhere in the distance, two bright red lights are visible. The guy thinks that he may have noticed a person. He sees a dark figure. An old man with a pumped torso calls the boy to him. This man's eyes shine brightly. He declares that he will be waiting for the guy on the edge of the abyss. The young man opens his eyes. He lies on the bed with a frightened look. The guy, whose face is dripping with drops of sweat, says that he had this strange dream again. A young man lying on his side hears someone call him by his first name, Sora, and warns them that they may be late. The young man shouts that he is already coming. In the foggy mirror you can see a vague reflection. The guy has a feeling as if he knows a person from his dream. Sora brushes his teeth. He tries to understand what abyss the old man was talking about. Someone appears behind the guy's back. He thinks that he probably sees these dreams because he overloaded his brain while studying. A man who has come out of the shower looks at the guy. He ruffles his hair and says that the guy seems to have overslept today. Sora asks her father not to treat him like a child, reminding him that he is already 15 years old. The man states that it doesn't mean anything and asks to take a look at his strong muscular body. He takes a bottle from the shelf. The hero declares that he does not look at his father, and what he says is simply disgusting. The boy's father unscrews the lid. Sora says that if they didn't live in such a tiny house, he wouldn't have to see his half-naked parent every day. He replies that when he gets rich, he will move his whole family to a big house, and then the guy and Riku will have their own rooms. Water pours out of the hero's mouth. He declares that his father has promised all this for 5 years. Water pours from the tap into the sink. The man says that life has become much easier since Riku joined the army. Sora stands with water in his mouth. He thinks that his brother has been in the army for 3 years, and this does not seem to have affected their living conditions in any way. The guy rubs his chin thoughtfully. He himself plans to go to the army in the future. Sora looks at his parents. He thinks that when he becomes a soldier, he will have to say goodbye to this life. His father, who is always joking and seems a bit of an unreliable person, as well as his mother, who is always strict, but loves him very much. The young man's father, smiling, rubs the back of his head. His mother indignantly says something to him. Sora pushes his chair back. He is very comfortable with these people, and he would not like to leave them. The whole family is visible in the window of the apartment. Someone asks what it was and suggests that an earthquake occurred. A shadow falls on the multi-story building. The hero thinks that he always knew that this quiet life would end one day, but he could not even imagine that everything would happen in this way. In the middle of the city you can see a huge tower. Sora looks out the window in shock. He states that this must be some kind of joke. Jet planes fly up to the tower. The hero thinks that at that time he did not know how the appearance of this structure would change the fate of humanity. The guy looks at the giant building. He is shocked to the core, and thinks that even then he realized that this tower is somehow connected with his dreams. The family members look at the phone lying on the table. Riku tells them that he is fine and he just has to follow the orders of the command. The young man hopes that he will be able to return home soon. An avatar is visible on the screen of the device. Sora recalls that there was no confidence in his brother's voice. Family members are sitting at the table. The young man thinks that they have lost contact with Riku that day. The hero and his parents look at the TV screen. The guy recalls that they were then told that people would be fine if they did not leave their homes. A female reporter with a frightened look reports that the number of towers that have appeared in the world has reached 20. Only static is visible on the screen. The hero recalls that television very soon stopped working, and all information began to be transmitted on the radio. Father and son look out into the street, from where an order is heard for the residents of the city to evacuate to the shelter immediately. The young man's mother writes on a piece of paper. The hero recalls that it was a letter to his brother, which said that they were moving to the evacuation center. Family members with backpacks walk down the street. Sora looks frightened to his left. He thinks that everything they saw on the street indicated that very terrible things were happening somewhere nearby. A military vehicle passes in front of the guy. Inside sits a soldier in a helmet. The hero recalls that on the faces of the fighters he saw in the cars, there was nothing but despair. The car drives on. With markings visible on its body, Sora recalls that the combat vehicles had horrible claw marks, and a disgusting smell of decomposition wafted from inside. The young man's father, frowning in front of him, asks what is happening in this world in general. The family approaches the entrance to a temporary shelter, which was equipped in the school building. In a spacious room, people are sitting on the floor. The hero recalls that the shelter was overcrowded with refugees, and people almost did not talk to each other. The guy looks at the sad old man. It seems to him that everyone then resigned themselves to their fate and just waited for death. The hero and his parents pass by unfortunate people. The father calls his son. A smiling young man can be seen behind the hero's back. Sora thinks that even in this oppressive environment, there are disgusting villains. A child is sitting on the floor. One of the scoundrels grabs him by the hand and asks how the boy dared to steal bread from him. The child shouts indignantly that he did not steal anything, and the guy has probably already eaten what was distributed to everyone here equally. The child points to the wrapper, which is in the pocket of the villain. The bastard hits the boy with his knee in the chin. He takes the bread from the child. The people sitting around see what is happening. but hope that someone else will put the bastard in his place. The young man, having taken the bread from the child, smiles happily. Looking into the eyes of the crying child, he declares that he is not yet full, so he will take the food from the boy. With his mouth wide open, the bastard declares that until it is over, the child will give him all his food. He states that everything should last only a few days, and during this time the guy will clearly not die. The boy weeps bitterly. The hero's father approaches the scoundrel and puts his hand on his shoulder. He asks why he behaves in such a disgusting way in this difficult situation. The bastard, smiling, looks around and declares that the old man must mind his own business. The man angrily tells the bastard to give the bread to the child immediately. He swings to strike and shouts for the hero's father to shut up. In the next second, he receives a powerful kick to the chest. The bastard lies on the floor. The man gives the bread to the child. The boy sincerely thanks him. The bastard comes to his senses and begins to swear loudly. The hero's father looks menacingly at the bastard. He wipes his chin with his hand. He steps away from the man and says that he will remember it, after which he spits on the floor. Sora calls out to her father. He declares that the young man need not worry, and he will not take his eyes off this bastard. The bastard looks at his offender over his shoulder. The hero looks frightened at the villain. He thinks that he will not forget this man, whose name is Ag Kagawa, until his death. Behind the scumbag's back you can see his comrades. He kicks the hero. Sora remembers that this ghoul got real pleasure when he mocked him. Ag and his comrades move away from the hero sitting on the floor. A soldier runs into the shelter, shouts that he has an urgent message, and declares that everyone must immediately leave the evacuation center through the back door and load into the trucks. The fighter puts his hand to his mouth so that he can be heard better. A man in a suit, adjusting his glasses, asks why this is necessary. The soldier states that this is classified information. He apologizes and states that he cannot disclose the details. The man asks again, very dissatisfied. Pointing his finger at the fighter, he shouts that at first people were forced to stay at home for 2 days, after that they were brought to this evacuation center, and even after everything that happened, they continue to hide from them what is happening. A man throws a bag at his feet and asks why then the citizens of this country pay taxes to someone. The soldier looks around in fright. Behind him, someone is breaking down the door. The fighter is shouting that they are already here, and people need to run. The man asks in amazement who he is talking about. Sora pushes his father and mother. He yells that they should run away immediately. The guy looks around in horror. He has very unpleasant premonitions about all this. The soldier props up the door with his hands. He shouts that he can't hold them back anymore, and that everyone in the shelter must immediately load into the cars. The door flies out. Monsters crash down on the soldier. Sora sees a terrifying monster with huge fangs. Looking back, he tries to comprehend what is happening in this world. Frightened people run away from the monsters, begging for help. The father looks back at his son. The mother asks him to hurry up. People jump into trucks. Sora shouts that the car his parents got into is already overcrowded. He pushes his father and mother, helping them get inside. The father holds his son's hand. From behind he is pushed. Someone shouts that there are no more seats in the truck, and demands to let go of his son's hand. The second man yells that they are detaining everyone. The hero grits his teeth with anger. The mother calls the young man, who tells her that he will get into another truck. He runs past another car and realizes that it is also overcrowded. Sora sees a car that seems to have free space. He jumps into it. Behind the young man's back, you can see other people who simply did not have time to run to the departing car. Someone stretches out his hand to the guy. The hero grabs it and thanks his savior. With a disgusting smile on his face, he declares that there is nothing to thank him for. Sora looks at the one who held out his hand in amazement. Ag Kagawa, smiling disgustingly, looks at the guy and declares that it is he who should express gratitude. The hero does not understand why this bastard should have been in this particular car. Ag throws the hero out of the back. He calls him a piece of shit, and says that he wanted to kill the hero's father. But now he is ready to make do with the son of this bastard. Sora lies on his back. It seems to him that everything is over for him. The guy covers his face with his hands. He lies on the ground, realizing that he really does not want to die. The young man closes his eyes. He mentally begs for at least someone to help him. Sora sees translucent bare legs. A muscular old man calls out to the young man, who realizes that in front of him is the same character he saw in his dreams. Next to the old man's face, jets of white energy are visible. The man says that he will be waiting for the guy on the edge of the abyss. Jets of white energy are visible in the air. The hero lies on the ground, covering his head with his hands. Sora is shocked. He tries to figure out if he is asleep or awake now, and where he is. The young man sees a stone axe. The weapon crashes into the ground next to his face. Sora sees a goblin. He jumps up and runs away, trying to figure out where his parents are now and why he ended up here alone. The goblin throws an axe at the young man's back. The hero thinks that he died and ended up in hell. The axe hits the guy's chin. The stone breaks into several pieces. The hero mentally curses the monster that attacked him for no reason. Sora looks over her shoulder in fright and asks the goblin why he is not lagging behind. Sticking out its red tongue, the monster rushes forward. Sora runs away. He remembers the tower that appeared, Ag's face and the ghost of an old man. The hero thinks that first a giant structure appeared, then he was thrown out of a truck, then he saw a mysterious old man, and now some green monster is chasing him. The young man's eyes widen with hatred. he mentally curses everything in the world. Taking a stone in his hand, the hero rushes at the goblin. He shouts loudly that he will kill all the enemies he sees. The killed monster lies in front of the guy, who realizes that it seems that the worst thing is over, and he survived. A huge wound gapes in the goblin's chest. Sora realizes that everything that is happening to him is very much like some kind of computer game. He notices the number 1 on the monster's chest and realizes that, most likely, this is the designation of the monster's rank. The young man looks frightened to his left. A sharp crystal emerges from the goblin's chest. Sora looks at him in shock. The goblin lies on the ground with his arms spread wide. The crystal flies up. It pierces the hero's chest. Sora looks down in shock. The young man realizes that the deep scratch that was on his cheek has healed. The guy clenches his fists. He thinks that this crystal has not only healed his wounds, but also made him stronger. Sora picks up a stone axe from the ground. He realizes that he seems to have stepped into the next level, just like in a computer game. The young man resolutely heads forward, thinking that there may be other goblins on this tiny island, and since the young man does not want to be suddenly attacked, he decides to find these creatures first. He passes by dilapidated arches. Sora clenches his fist and looks to his left, thinking he's walked around the area, but he hasn't found any monsters or any roads leading from here. The hero looks at the ruins behind him. He understands that he can get out only in that place. A stone island hangs among the clouds. The young man notices the steps. The sun peeks through the clouds, and Sora realizes that Smoke Sky Island is surrounded by stairs. Bulging eyes, the hero looks down. The situation seems to him simply disgusting. The guy goes down the steps. He thinks that in computer games such an area is a favorite habitat of monsters. The guy imagines a skeleton pushing him down the stairs, and thinks about how if he fell from here in the game, he would just respawn. But for some reason he doesn't want to check if it works here to make sure that he is really in some kind of game. The hero is frightened and presses his back against the rock. He sees a passage in the rock in front of him and realizes that he seems to have found a way out. Sora peers through the opening. He holds a stone axe with both hands. The young man sees a torch in front of him. The hero stands in front of the tombstone. Sora examines the tombstone. He realizes that he has never seen such symbols before. However, oddly enough, he understands their meaning. The young man examines the slab. He learns that the fragments belong to the carriers, and by obtaining them all, he can earn the right to leave the abyss. Sora understands what he needs to do now to get out of here. A smile appears on his face. The young man is standing on the steps. He thinks that he has a lot of motivation now, and if you think about it, the goblin he killed was not so strong. Sora puts his hands on the gates. He is determined to get out of here and survive. The gates swing open. The young man sees a bright light in front of him. He thinks about the fact that the area of the first level was 900 square meters, and the number 1 was written on the goblin's chest. Sora remembers a defeated enemy. He stands in front of the grinning wolves and thinks about how the area of the second level was 1,800 square meters, and on one of the 2 monsters, he found the number 2. The hero sticks a weapon into the head of a snake. He remembers that the area of the third level was 3,600 square meters, and he found the number 3 on one of the 4 enemies. The system reports the transition to the 4th level. Sora thinks that the fragments are only in the bodies of monsters marked with numbers. These fragments are the keys to move on to the next level, and the higher the number, the stronger the monsters become. The young man opens another gate. He stares ahead, thinking that his biggest concern is that finding the keys is getting harder. In front of the hero is a gigantic space covered with mountains. He thinks that the area of the level doubles with each successive increase, just like the number of monsters he has to kill. Sora, who wields a stone axe, towers over the corpses of horned wolves. He opens his mouth wide. The hero thinks that he himself is also becoming stronger and stronger at each next level. Sora deals with a giant crocodile. The guy is sitting on the edge of a cliff. He thinks that the variety of monsters is also gradually increasing, and on the 12th he met monsters attacking the shelter in which he was with his parents. A young man stands on a rock over pointy-eared creatures. Now that he is splattered with blood, towering over their corpses, Sora thinking that these creatures can no longer resist him. The guy is surrounded by people with goat heads. Then he runs down the steps from the rhinos. Sora thinks that there are so many monsters now that his senses have begun to dull. System windows inform about the passage of several more levels and an increase in the number of monsters. A tiny figure of the guy is visible on the body of a giant creature. He thinks that when he got to the 30th level, the number of monsters reached 500 million, and the search for the key began to resemble the process of finding a needle in a haystack. Winged monsters are visible above the boy's head. He recalls that some monsters carrying keys inside them were protected by squads of other monsters. Sora sees enemies with huge, sharp fangs in front of her. Now in front of him is a giant many-eyed insect. The young man recalls that some enemies had to be looked for in small caves. The hero strikes by picking up large stones. He thinks that the most annoying thing was that it took quite a decent amount of time to destroy each of the enemies. A giant monster holds a weapon in his hands. Sora jumps on the head of a hideous monster. Roman numerals are visible on the forehead of another enemy. The hero dismembers the body of the monster. He thinks that, despite everything, he continued to move forward. The guy opens the next gate. He is standing on a cliff above a whole sea of monsters. It is reported that the guy is on the 42nd level of the abyss, and the number of monsters is more than 2 trillion. Sora sees another group of enemies in front of her. He laughs like a madman and screams that he got into real shit. Winged creatures soar above the dilapidated columns. The hero, whose body is covered in scars, tries to understand what year it is, then he realizes that the concept of time no longer has any meaning to him. Skeletons are visible under the giant slab. Sora thinks there is only death and carnage in this place. A guy draws lines on a stone. He looks to his left. Monsters approach him from behind. A shadow approaches the young man. A giant boar raises an axe over his head. Sora thinks that death is overtaking the monsters as a result of the massacre he inflicts on them. A dark liquid is visible on the stove. A young man destroys a giant boar. Jets of white energy rise around him. The guy is holding the head of a monster in his hand. The young man's face is covered by long hair. He tries to understand how many monsters he has already destroyed. Throwing the enemy's head to the ground, he decides to mark the slab. The guy draws another line. Kneeling in front of a rock, he says that it seems like it's time to find another key. Stones are flying around the young man. Wearily lowering his head, he stands in front of a monstrous insect. The monster looks just huge compared to the hero, who states that this creature appeared in front of him very spectacularly. Smiling, Sora asks if the key holder is in front of him. The guy is standing on uneven rocks. He jumps. The young man flies up to the enemy's head, thinking that no matter how strong this creature is, its end is already predetermined. The hero's eyes emit jets of violet energy. He climbs up the stone blockage, thinking that even the strongest monsters die after one of his blows. Smiling, Sora looks down. He realizes that the very meaning of power has lost its meaning to him. He stands barefoot on the debris of the slab. The young man clenches his fist. With a completely insane look, he looks up and demands that the 42nd level key finally appear in front of him. Dragons are circling in the sky. The guy shouts that he is tired of all this. A tower is visible in the dark sky. It is reported that at the beginning of the 3rd millennium, 20 such grandiose structures appeared in the world. People look in shock at the structure with sharp spires. We are informed that before humanity could figure out how to deal with these towers, the monsters that came out of there almost completely exterminated humans. In front of us are terrible monsters. It is reported that this event went down in history as the Day of Judgment. Abominable creatures tear people apart. We learn that the few survivors have awakened and gained access to a mysterious system. A dinosaur-like monster is seen above the young man's head. The system notifies him that the awakening is over, and combat statistics are initialized. The young people look shocked at the system windows. It is reported that the awakened have gained gigantic power. Human society has been rebuilt, and hunter guilds have been organized. The fighters stand in front of a giant tower. Sora chasing a horned wolf. The young man rushes forward and loudly demands that the monster wait for him and show his parameters. A chain is wrapped around the wolf. Sora realizes that someone has just used a very strong scroll of movement on the animal. The guy hears someone say that this challenge should not be allowed under any circumstances. Sora, who now looks like some kind of savage, looks up in surprise, realizing that he hears human speech. The wolf soars into the air. The hero realizes that this seems to be the exit from the space in which he found himself. The young man looks up. He bends his legs. The young man realizes that he can really get out of here. The guy finds himself inside a bright white column of energy. The system warns him that summoning the abyss is not capable of moving more than 2 living beings. System messages and chains are visible around the hero. Sora grits her teeth. His eyes are shining. He thinks he won't let anyone get in his way. Sora rushes forward. Bats fly over the ruins. It is reported that the case takes place on Earth. A girl with pink hair looks to her left. She wears elegant shoes on her feet. Yusanozaki, a level 19 hunter, thinks she must break away from her pursuers right away. A vine is wrapped around her leg. Stumbling, the girl flies forward. She falls on the grass. Liana wraps herself around the girl's arm. She says that she is in great pain. She is approached by Aika, a level 34 druid, and a big man in a bandana. The third hunter whose back we see, demands that you give up the scroll of movement, as a level 60 item should not be used by a beginner who is only level 19. Choji Shido, a level 35 swordsman, demands that you give the scroll or he will not spare her. Aika asks that her companion not kill the girl. Yu frighteningly shouts that fights between hunters are prohibited, and her opponents break the rules. Shozi Itashida, a level 38 barbarian, licks his lips and asks what rules he is talking about. He thrusts a huge sword in Yu's face and declares that he is the one who sets the rules here. The brute has an evil twinkle in his eyes, saying that if the girl gives him the scroll, he may let her go, saving all her limbs. Yu holds the scroll behind her back. She states that if she were her pursuers, she would simply leave her behind. Aika looks at the girl anxiously. She yells that she is going to use the summon, and she should not be allowed to do so under any circumstances. Shoziai, glaring at Yu, calls her a mindless creature. The big man's face twists with anger. He demands that the scroll be given to him immediately. He draws his weapon. The hunter looks frightened. He realizes that there is a teleportation circle in front of him. Yu, arms wide apart, declares that she will die anyway, so she will drag her enemies with her. Shoziai, looking at the girl in shock, states that she is using a force summoning. Aika is frightened and says that no one is able to control the monsters that are pulled out of their dimensions in this way. It seems to her that as a result, they will surely all die. Choji rushes forward with a sword in his hand. He shouts that Yu must be stopped at all costs. A girl with sparks around her head screams angrily that she will kill her enemies. A blue vortex appears above her head. Shoziai, frowning, states that he feels a gigantic energy, and it seems that they will indeed come to an end soon. Blue chains stretch from the ground to the giant whirlwind. The hunters look at the monster that has appeared. Choji Shido states that he finally sees it. It turns out that they have a third-level Cerberus in front of them. Choji laughs loudly. Aika states that it is a very cute animal and throws him a bone. She says that you scared them all, but it turned out to be not so scary at all. The pink-haired girl looks at the wolf in frustration and asks why he appeared. One of the hunters asks if he really risked her life to protect this stupid scroll. The girl looks in amazement at the clawed hand that appears in front of her. The hero tears the wolf in two. The hunters look at the boy in shock, Shido shouting that there appears to be a humanoid monster in front of them. He looks at the young man in amazement. He, lowering his head, declares that he has finally got out. Spreading her arms to her sides, Sora shouts that he is now free. Sora, raising her hands, laughs like a madman. Shoziai says in fright that he shivers from this laughter. Aika states that he feels terrible pressure. Looking at the hero in horror, she asks what kind of person he is. Sora looks at the girl in surprise. He walks up to Aika, and she freezes in horror. The young man's eyes are shining. The guy puts his hands on the hunter's shoulders and asks if he is on Earth now. The girl replies that, of course, yes. Continuing to laugh, Sora happily says that he is finally back. He asks what is wrong with the people he sees and wonders if they are cosplaying someone. Choji and Shoziai look at the young man angrily. They rush to attack, shouting loudly that the guy shouldn't underestimate Tiger's Roar Guild. The hunters unleash their weapons on the hero. He looks back at them over his shoulder. Shoziai says in surprise that it looks like a monster in front of him. The big man is reflected in the eyes of the hero. He turns the word that has just sounded in his head. The image begins to blur. Sora grabs the throat hunter. He easily lifts him off the ground and demands that he show his number. Panting, Shoziai asks what the guy is talking about. He looks intently at the hunter. The hero unclenches his hand. Shoziai falls to the ground. It becomes clear that the young man has urinated. Sora stands in front of the opponent. The big man tries to say something, but he fails. The hero tells the hunters to fall to hell. Shoziai, his face twisted in horror, declares that he will remember what was just done to him. Yu, looking at his savior, notices the incredible energy that emanates from him and the terrible scars covering his body. The girl looks at Sora in amazement, trying to figure out who he is, and if he is a monster who was summoned from the abyss by a scroll. The hero, looking at the girl, asks how many years have passed since the towers appeared. Yu replies in surprise that it's been 5 years. Sora, whose eyes are shining brightly, asks if he is really on Earth now, what kind of scroll it was and why the girl is dressed this way. She replies that after the appearance of the towers on Earth, the so-called system was introduced. A system window is visible in front of you. She talks about the events that are happening, including the fact that a third of the city was destroyed. Sora states that the world has changed a lot in the 5 years he spent in the abyss. A huge monster is visible on the tablet screen. Yu reports that S City survived 7 large invasions, and she fled from there. The hero is amazed. He understands that we are talking about the city in which he was born. Grabbing the girl by the shoulders, he asks in what condition the settlement is now. She replies that it is almost completely destroyed. Yu reports that, however, strong hunters have been sent to the city and they may be able to deal with the monsters. Sora excitedly asks how he can get to S City from here. The girl points her finger behind her back and reports that the city is in that direction. Yu, looking over his shoulder, realizes that the guy went there alone. An arch with a cross is visible in front of her. The girl thinks that she should tell her sister about the appearance of this mysterious man. The hunters walk down the city street. Shoziai calls the hero a bastard. 2 guys support the big man by the arms. A character in a raincoat is seen in front of the young people. The question is who he is at all. A strange man looks at the hunters with glowing eyes and states that he smells the hero on all of them, and that he gives 3 seconds to tell where the guy is. Behind the backs of the hunters, you can see splashes of blood. The young people look in horror at the man who appears in front of him. Shoziai angrily shouts that this is already some kind of absurdity, and asks what they want from him this time. The cloaked character strikes, stating that time is up. The system reports the deaths of hunters Aika, Choji Shido, and Shoziai Toshida. In front of us is the headquarters of Tiger's Roar Guild. Brunette, looking down, reports that the group of hunters led by Shoziai Toshida shows no signs of life, and the location of Usanazaki and the scroll remains unknown. The person to whom she reports breaks his glass. He declares that this is some kind of nonsense. The young blonde man asks if the hunters recommended by the girl could not defeat even a level 19 summoner. She reports that the signals from the hunters disappeared at the same time. Richt Mukai, a level 118 storm priest, deduces that all of these people were killed in one hit. Looking over the girl's shoulder, he demands that she find the one who did it, who makes it clear that she understands the order. Richt, standing up from his chair, states that he needs to grab Usanazaki and interrogate her. The blonde looks out the window at the city. He orders to kill everyone who dared to offend his people. Richt looks in surprise at the hero flying in front of him. Frowning, the young man states that he smelled an incredible smell of blood and asks who it was just in front of him. Flying creatures are visible outside the window. Richt realizes that the hero has headed for the destroyed zone. In front of us are dark silhouettes with glowing eyes. The blonde thinks that the invasion they are now experiencing is unparalleled in scale, and he has no doubt that very serious forces have come into play. the young man realizes that the tower that has been sleeping for 5 years has finally made its move. Rick moves away from the window. He gives the order to recall all reconnaissance groups. Sora flies against the background of a skyscraper. He looks up and sees winged monsters above him. From the roof of the building, the young man examines the destroyed buildings. It is reported that he is in the destroyed zone of S City. The sun is shining above the guy's head. Sora thinks that in the 5 years that he spent in the abyss, this city has turned into a real hell. The young man remembers his first fight with a goblin. He then remembers an episode when he plunged his axe into the chest of another monster. Sora thinks that he fell into the abyss completely helpless, but found power there. A chain is visible in front of the young man. He holds in his hand the heart torn from the monster's chest. The guy realizes that all his senses have been dulled there, and he himself has almost turned into a monster. Sora devours the heart. The hero remembers the members of his family. A winged creature can be seen above his head. It falls down. The young man thinks that thoughts of family supported him morally and forced him to move forward, and the monsters he once feared so much have become just small fry for him, which he kills with one clap. Sora rushes forward. He mentally asks his father, mother and brother to take care of themselves and wait for him. In front of us are the multi-story buildings of S City. The hero thinks that once life was in full swing here, but now the city has turned into a desert, and the buildings in it look like after a terrible earthquake. The hero approaches the stairs. He thinks that, nevertheless, he does not see signs that monsters killed anyone here. The young man grabs the door handle. He realizes that since the evacuation took place, no one should have lived in the city. Sora pushes aside the fallen door and says that he is finally home. The guy enters the doorway. He is standing in front of a broken window. The young man knew that no one would be here, but he decided to come anyway, if only because this dwelling keeps many happy memories of his previous life. Smiling, the hero looks back. He notices a sheet of paper on the table. Sora reads the message left by his father. The man writes that everyone is talking about his son being killed, but he refuses to believe it, and reveals that he and his mother took all the things that belonged to Sora to his room, as they are sure that he is alive and he will still need them. Shedding streams of tears, the hero looks up. He says that his parents risked their lives to come here. The guy looks into the closet, as he learned from his father's letter that his parents hung up their son's favorite clothes according to size so that when he returned, he could change clothes. Sora opens a drawer where, according to the letter, there should be a map showing the way to hideout number 6. The hero looks at the photo. He thinks that at the end of the letter his father told him that they would be waiting for him and loved him very much. Sora, tears pouring from his eyes, looks at the papers dear to his heart. He sees his reflection in the shiny knife, and asks himself how strong he has become. The guy cuts his long hair. He hopes that he will have enough strength to stop the apocalypse, and then live happily again, as he once did. The hero stands in front of the mirror with a knife in his hand. He looks at his reflection, thinking that he needs to find the 6th refuge. Sora stands in front of the destroyed buildings. He realizes that he needs to go east, as the map suggests, but the roads are littered with ruins, and he will have to make his own way, as it will be much faster. A deep scar is visible on the young man's face. He jumps into the air. The hero sees a winged monster in front of him. The guy only needs one blow to deal with the monster. Sora rushes through the city, jumping from one building to another. We see 2 bored hunters. One of them says that he seems to have heard some sound. His friend replies that perhaps the guy drank too much, and he is imagining all sorts of nonsense. One of them points his finger to his left, and says that he noticed something there. His partner states that the guy must have made a mistake, since he himself did not see anything. A third young man runs up to them. He shouts that he filmed everything on camera. Sora, smiling, flies over the buildings. The hunters realize that they are not a monster, but a human. The girl shouts loudly not to be approached. She sits by the ruins and begs to be spared, justifying herself by saying that she came to find at least some food. 3 hunters approach her. One of them states that he did not expect to find a survivor in this desert. The second says that the girl has a magnificent figure. The third remembers that he has not had a woman for a very long time. One of the villains, licking his lips, declares that the girl should not worry, since she has met very good guys. He comes up and says that they will take care of her. The girl begs not to touch her. Bending over the unfortunate refugee, the scoundrel asks her not to be frightened. The bastard is drooling from his mouth. He says that he will be very gentle. The bastard, grabbing the girl by the leg, says that it would be very disappointing not to enjoy such a gorgeous body. We see someone's foot. Its owner says that some things in this world do not change. The hero, looking angrily at the hunters over his shoulder, calls them vile pieces of shit. One of the villains notices the young man and warns that the guy will be in trouble if he tries to stick his nose where he does not need to. The hunter, with a sword behind him, orders his subordinates to deal with the young man. They, armed, rush to attack. Sora stands with her back to the villains. He strikes with the edge of his palm. The hunter, with blood gushing out of his mouth, falls to the ground. The hero frowns at his enemies. He grabs the next one by the arm. Then he kicks directly in the face of the bastard. The squad leader reaches for a sword. He asks who the hell is in front of him, and reveals that he is a member of the Tiger's Roar Guild. The bastard warns that if the hero touches him even with a finger, he will be pulled out of the ground and destroyed. Sora states that it appears to be Ag Kagawa in front of him. The young man, looking intently at the villain, asks if he has managed to forget the face of the man he once killed. The bastard looks at the hero in fear and says that he can't believe that Makujima is in front of him. Ag screams in horror that this is simply impossible. The hero looks at the bastard menacingly. The latter, putting out his hand in front of him, asks not to approach him and asks how the young man can be alive at all. Sora exhales tiredly. He stretches out his hand. The young man grabs the enemy by the throat and says that he is right. Ag tries to push the young man's hand away from him, who says that because of this bastard, he ended up in hell and got out of there for a long time. The bastard's eyes are ready to pop out of their sockets. Sora clenches his fingers. He declares that now it's Ag's turn to go to that very hell. Saliva drips from the guy's chin. The hero thinks that he will deprive the bastard of the last drop of dignity, and he has enough strength to do it. Ghostly creatures are seen behind the young man. They demand that he kill Ag, and whisper to the guy that he is the strongest, and everyone must bow to his will. Sora recalls how Ag and his friends tortured him before. The villain has a bat in his hand. The guy recalls that then he felt humiliated and completely defenseless. The hero, who holds the scoundrel by the neck, is going to repay him for all his offenses. Sora recalls Ag strangling him, saying that he was torturing him because he took pleasure in smashing his dignity to smithereens. Under the white hair, the hero's eye is visible. He unclenches his hand. Ag, holding his throat, tries to clear his throat. Sora clutches his face. He understands that he should not be like this bastard. He then remembers how Ag molested the girl. The young man's eyes burn with evil fire. He understands that if this bastard continues to breathe, many more people will suffer. The young man calls the enemy by name, after which he says that he will not kill him, because he once tried to get rid of him, but could not do it. Sora adds that he cannot leave the bastard unpunished. Looking at the hero in fright, Ag asks what he is going to do. The young man again remembers how the villain mocked him. He declares that for the fact that he turned his school years into a complete hell, he will strike one blow. In the memory of the young man, a little boy pops up, from whom Ag took bread. He declares that for bullying the weak, the bastard will receive another blow. The hero covers his face with his hands. He declares that for the fact that the villain tried to kill him by throwing him off the truck, he will receive 2 more blows. Looking at the bastard menacingly, Sora says that they will be counted if he lands a total of 4 punches. Ag begs the young man not to do so, and admits that he was wrong. Looking at the guy with pleading eyes, the bastard asks for mercy. He declares that if the hero hits him like the first time, he will simply kill him. Sora, grabbing the enemy by the scruff of the neck, declares that he does not have to worry. The scumbag's eyes reflect the hero, who raises his hand to strike. The guy hits for the first time, promising that Ag will survive. The scoundrel's comrades look on in shock at what is happening. Sora says it's time for a second strike. Blood splatters can be seen next to the sword. The hero strikes the 3rd blow. Raising his right arm, he demands that Ag stand up. The bastard's face resembles a bloody mess. He asks Sora to finish him off. The hero kicks the scum in the face. He falls to the ground. Ag's eyes are bleeding. The young man calmly looks at the enemy, thinking that he tore off all 4 limbs and blinded him. It seems to him that this should be enough. Sora in a threatening tone tells the hunters standing behind him to take their friend to the hospital, who frightenedly promise to do so. Putting his hands in his pockets, the hero says that these scum should no longer catch his eye. Sora jumps into the air. He thinks the cleanup is done, and he can move on. We see the profile of the young man. He thinks that it is time to see his family again. Over the city, you can see the trail that the young man leaves behind him. In front of us are destroyed houses. It is reported that they are located in the buffer zone of S City. A soldier sitting on the rubble declares that he is willing to give anything to be on duty on the walls. His comrade replies that at least here they don't have to fight the monsters directly. An officer approaches the fighters. He declares that they should not be cowards, and if a monster appears, they must fight back, and not just run away somewhere far away. One of the soldiers laughs. First Lieutenant Tanji Kajura, who has level 31, orders his fighters to remain vigilant, warning them that no one knows when monsters might appear here. The fighter salutes him. Private Shoki Matsura, a level 22 warrior, states that they are still in the buffer zone, and the monsters from Area X are unlikely to be here. In the next second, tentacles appear next to the soldiers. Someone shouts loudly that a monster has appeared. A level 45 child of Kraken hangs above the fighters, a type of monster protected by a shell. One of the soldiers orders them to remain calm and hold the line. The fighters are firing at the enemy from firearms. We see the giant eye of the monster. One of the soldiers is frightened and says that the monster's level is too high, and their weapons are simply powerless against it. Judging by the blurred outlines, the monster accelerates sharply. One of the fighters prepares to meet it. Tanji Kajura, looking to his right, gives the order to disperse. Child of Kraken strikes with a tentacle and slices one of the fighters in half. A comrade of the deceased shouts his name in despair. The fighter, looking at the giant monster, curses this half-baked octopus. He rushes forward and shouts loudly that he will kill this creature. The soldier runs up to the monster, which is being fired upon by other soldiers. A huge eye is visible above the fighter. The soldiers look up in shock. One of them, covering his face with his hands, says that the monster seems to have stopped. Soldiers look up at Child of Kraken. One of them asks in amazement what is going on. The young man, gritting his teeth in anger, assumes that the monster is afraid of something. The eye of the terrible creature closes with sharp appendages. Child of Kraken seems to be trying to defend itself with its tentacles. The soldier who is holding a box says that he has no idea what the monster is afraid of, but it means that they have a great chance. The guy, his mouth wide open, rushes forward. He launches a box with a lit fuse at the monster. A very powerful explosion is heard. One of the fighters says in amazement that they seem to have killed the monster. Before us is the eye of a monster. The soldier looks up in bewilderment. Sitting on the ground, he shouts that the child of Kraken was unharmed, and it's just unthinkable. A sharp tentacle approaches the soldier. One of the fighters sees Sora descend on the monster's head. The young man looks up in horror. Tanji Kajura, gritting her teeth, looks at what is happening. The officer sees a blonde man towering over a dead monster in front of him. He says in bewilderment that the child of Kraken seems to have been frightened by this man. Tanji Kajura is amazed to say that the hero killed a monster that survived a powerful explosion with one blow. The officer admits that he knows very few S-rank hunters who have such destructive power. The lieutenant frowns at the young man. He realizes that he has never seen him before, and must find out who he is at all costs. Sora stands on the corpse of the child of Kraken. Tanji studies the young man with the help of a special skill called Inspect, which allows him to view detailed information about the target. The lieutenant is shocked to the core. He sees a system error warning. The man realizes that this guy's level data cannot be obtained. It seems that the combat officer is uncomfortable. One of the soldiers grabs his commander by the arm. The second asks Tanji what happened. The third shouts that the lieutenant is unconscious and calls for a medic. Sora looks over her shoulder. He turns to one of the fighters, stating that he wants to ask a question, who makes it clear that he is listening to the young man. The hero asks where hideout number 6 is. The fighter replies that it is about 50 kilometers to the north, but to get there, you will have to go through Area X. Sora asks for clarification of what he is talking about. Raising his right hand, the soldier states that this is a place where they are trying to hold back the advance of monsters. They are all lured there to minimize the damage from battles. The soldier reports that there are many worthy hunters fighting monsters there. Someone nearby says that very rare trophies have been discovered. The hero frowns to his right. Soldiers collect objects from the ground that fell from the monster. Sora understands that in the real world, after defeating monsters, trophies are given. What is happening more and more reminds him of some kind of computer game. The young man asks the soldier how difficult this monster was for the fighters who fought him. The soldier replies that level 45 monsters are very serious opponents. Sora understands that even such weak creatures cause huge problems here. Looking at his interlocutor, he asks how many monsters above the 45th level participate in the invasion. He replies that there are probably no more than 100, and if such creatures were common, then humanity would have died out long ago. The hero turns away from his interlocutor and says goodbye to him, declaring that he must go. The soldier opens his mouth. He looks at the back of the hero. The fighter says that his request may seem inappropriate. Putting his hand to his chest, he bows and asks Sora to go to Area X. Looking at the hero excitedly, the young man says that if there is such a strong hunter in that place, it will be possible to save a large number of human lives. The hero asks if the path to the 6th shelter really goes through Area X, and hears an affirmative answer. Looking at the soldier, Sora states that he agrees. The soldier asks again. The hero, smiling sadly, says that he will go to the 6th hideout through Area X and destroy all the monsters that are unlucky enough to meet him on the way. In the military camp near the front line, there is an off-road vehicle next to the tent. Tanji Kajura comes to his senses. The soldier exclaims happily that the lieutenant has finally woken up. The officer, wiping his mouth with his hand, asks how long he was unconscious. The soldier replies that about 10 minutes. Smiling, he looks at the flask and declares that the trophies dropped from the monster work wonders. Tanji frowns and asks where the man who saved them earlier is. A soldier tells an officer sitting on a stretcher that the guy has gone north. The latter, clutching his forehead, repeats the words he heard. The officer looks at the soldier in shock and asks him to repeat what he said. The soldier states that the hero reported that he was going to the 6th shelter. The lieutenant, glancing at the soldier, asks if the young man is going to pass through Area X. He puts his hand on his helmet and declares that this is true, and that apparently the man does not care about danger at all, as he went there without any hesitation. Tanji orders the soldier to contact Central Command immediately. He asks again in amazement. The officer, looking down, thinks that he has only about 10 minutes left before the designated time. The commander looks at his watch, realizing that he can still make it. The fighter opens the tent canopy and declares that he has established communication through an emergency channel. He hands the officer the phone and asks why it is necessary to contact the Central Command on this issue. Tanji, looking at the screen of the device, explains to the fighter that this operation is different from all the previous ones. He says that it is top secret, so very few people knew about it. A projection screen appears on the wall of the tent, and Tanji reports that Area X, which has long served as a battlefield, is no longer considered a monster containment area. Looking at the blue window, the officer declares that this area will soon turn into a bombing zone. We see the officers of the command center. The girl, turning around, reports that an emergency call has been received from the B-22 area. Senior Officer Rinji Kamigaya, a level 58 fire mage, states that he is willing to listen. The girl, looking at the computer monitor, says that she will now display the call on the screen. It works with the keyboard. Tanji Kagera is visible on the monitor, giving the communication code BW3422, introducing himself, and stating that he has an important message. The officer reports that a mysterious hunter who does not know about the upcoming operation has just gone to the bombing zone. Renji Kumigaya nonchalantly states that this doesn't change anything, and then asks if the officer is really contacting the emergency channel just to report his mistake. Tanji, looking down, states that this is not the case at all. Looking at the phone in his hand, the lieutenant says that he thinks it is necessary to notify the hunter immediately of the upcoming bombing. Renji Kumigaya tries to interrupt the officer's report. He angrily declares that this guy is very strong, and they can't let him die so stupidly. Renji Kumigaya, sitting in a chair, looks at the screen and asks the lieutenant if the guy is really a strong hunter. The blonde frowns and wonders what level the man had. Tanji, gritting his teeth in anger, says he doesn't know. Renji sighs in disappointment as she looks at the screen. Folding his hands in front of his face, the general asks if Tanji Kajura really called his superiors on the emergency line because of a hunter whose level is unknown, and who, breaking all the rules, went to the bombing zone. The girl behind Renji says that this hunter will most likely die before he can deliver any message. Covering his mouth with his fist, Renji declares that the hunter may not have enough brains, but the comedic talent is fully present. The girl sitting next to Renji turns away from him. He cheerfully declares that this hunter seems to lack the instinct of self-preservation. In front of the laughing fat man on the monitor, Tanji is visible. Renji, with a frowning girl next to him, states that if he reports to his superiors that Tanji Kajura interfered with the operation, they will be held accountable. Miya Tanasaki, a level 73 golem tamer and commander of a western faction, is trying to figure out if Renji is really ready to set up his own people who have to fight such powerful enemies. It seems to her that her colleague is a complete idiot. Renji grins happily. Folding her arms over her chest, the girl thinks that at the same time, Tanji Kajura, a well-trained officer, is trying to save the complete stranger, even if it means stopping the operation. The girl looks at the lieutenant, whose face can be seen on the screen. She realizes that the guy he met was incredibly strong if the officer stood up for him. Tanji lowers her gaze. Miya is silent, closing her eyes. She turns to Lieutenant Tanji Kajura and states that she wants to believe that he has no intention of thwarting their plans. Looking sternly at the lieutenant, she declares that if he does not tell her a convincing reason why they should save that hunter, she will personally court-martial him. The officer looks at the girl in amazement. She, looking at Major General Tanji Kajura, asks if he will be satisfied with her proposed way out of the situation. The fat man grits his teeth with rage. Looking angrily in front of him, he asks Lieutenant Tanji Kagera if he can give them a reason why they should accept his offer. The lieutenant states that the hero killed a level 45 child of Kraken with just one hit. Mia can't believe what she just heard. She excitedly states that in this case, the guy must be stronger than an A-rank hunter, and then asks if he can be an S-rank hunter representing the army. Renji, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, states that this is impossible, as all S-rank military personnel are now on missions, and none of them are in Sector B-22. Mia, looking at the monitor, asks why Tanji Kajura didn't learn the hunter's level with his inspect skill. The officer states that he was unable to determine the level of this person. Mia stares at the monitor in shock. The lieutenant frowns that he is very ashamed. However, after using his skill on this person, he passed out due to an overabundance of information, which means that this guy was at least level 100. Renji drops her mouth open. He sits silently in his chair, tapping on the armrest. The Major General declares that this level of force is indeed rare, but that this cannot be a reason to stop the operation. The Major General's eyes emit a faint glow. Nobuo Yuasa, Rock Mage level 44, and the commander of the Eastern Group states that he agrees with Renji Kumigaya, and they cannot give up on the combat mission for such an unclear reason. A map of the area is visible in front of the old man. He states that fighters from 4 different corps are participating in this operation, and there are barely enough of them to surround and bomb the buffer zone. With markers visible on the map, Nobuo reports that according to the original plan, after bombing the surviving monsters, they should destroy the units that were already preparing to attack. Purple arrows depart from the indicated bombing site. The old man says that if an emergency order is given to suspend the operation, the monsters can react to the unusual activity and strike at one point. With 3 arrows now pointing in the same direction, Nobuo declaring that if that happens, the squad that will be hit will be defeated, and tens of thousands of soldiers will lose their lives. Raising his right hand, the warlord states that saving just one hunter at the cost of such a huge number of deaths seems completely inexpedient, and no one will do it, even if this hunter is S-rank. He stands with his mouth open. The monitor shows Miya Tanasaki sadly rubbing her chin with her fingers. The girl's eyes are closed. She opens them and resolutely states that for the stated reason, she refuses the request that came from Tanji Kajura, and they really cannot sacrifice the efforts of a huge number of people to save just one person. The girl states that this decision is final. Tanji stares at the screen, mouth open. The device in his hand informs him that the communication session is over. The lieutenant looks at the screen. He is ready to crush the smartphone. Shoki Matsura addresses his commander and says that he did everything in his power. The officer clenches his fist. Almost crying, he declares that the commanders are right and see the big picture much better. Judging by the eyes, Shoki is making some important decision for himself. He looks at the keys hanging on the officer's belt. The soldier reaches out with his hand to them. The lieutenant notices that the soldier has taken the keys. Shoki runs to the car. His commander demands to return immediately. As the bombing is about to begin, The guy shouts that it is still 6 minutes away. Sitting behind the wheel, the guy says that he still has time. The lieutenant, looking at the car driving away, shouts that Private First Class Shoki Matsura will be court-martialed if he does not return immediately. A car is driving at full speed down the street. One of the soldiers asks the officer if he needs to catch up and retrieve Private Shoki Matsura. Tanji, adjusting his cap, declares that nothing needs to be done, and the guy made his own decision. Sadly looking after the car as it leaves, he expresses hope that Shoki knows what he's doing. The soldier, holding onto the wheel, thinks that he must be on time. He grits his teeth. The guy frowns at the road. Sora stands in front of a huge monster. He cuts him in two with one blow. Shoki Matsura at the time did not yet know that he was trying to save the one who would become the hope of all mankind. Shoki drives the car. He curses and says that he has lost track. The soldier looks at the time on the car's panels. It seems to him that he has chosen the fastest path, but still has not found the hunter. The fighter wonders if this means that he is moving faster than he is in his car. Shoki frowns to his right. In front of us is the windshield of a car. The fighter realizes that he is approaching Area X. The guy grits his teeth with anger. He thinks that if he turns on the loudspeaker, the hunter should hear him. We see the lower part of the soldier's face. Shoki realizes that he will scare the monsters away at the same time. He looks at his watch again. The guy, having decided to take a risk after all, reaches for the device standing on the panel of the car. A soldier clutches a microphone in his hand. A military off-road vehicle stands in the middle of destroyed buildings. Shoki looks at the device he is holding in his hand, thinking that he is a real embarrassment to the army. The fighter closes his eyes. He says into the microphone that he is a soldier whom the hero helped a little earlier. Shoki, his mouth wide open, shouts that the area will soon be bombed, and the hunter must evacuate immediately. Sora's defeated monsters are seen underneath his feet, and he hears a warning from Shoki. The hero looks thoughtfully to his left. He realizes that he has not met a single hunter in this area because of the upcoming bombing. The young man raises his right hand. He thinks that the monsters do not pose a particular threat to him, but the bombing, as it seems to him, can be dangerous for him. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, Sora imagines a bomb falling from the plane. He thinks he must avoid pointless risks, and the soldier who warns him risks his life to warn of the bombing. Winged monsters are visible above the hero's head. He understands that he must not allow the death of this soldier. Shoki, sitting in the car, tries to understand if the hero heard his warning. He sees the clock and the monster flying up to him. A huge paw falls to the ground. Shoki says in fright that he has indeed attracted the attention of monsters. The guy holds the steering wheel tightly. He understands that he must get out of here immediately. The fighter presses the gas pedal. Frowning, he thinks about the fact that the hunter is still in Area X. A giant monster can be seen next to the car. Sora taps her finger on the car window. Shoki, looking outside, thanks fate that the guy is alive. The hero asks what the soldier meant when he shouted into the loudspeaker that this area would soon be bombed. Shoki, looking at the watch, realizes that there is 1 second left before the start of the impact. Readings change at 1700 hours. Planes drop bombs. The soldier says that they are too late. Sora looks at the explosions in front of him. He is standing next to the car. Stones are visible next to his leg. A powerful explosion is heard. Sora, holding out his hand, prevents the huge stone debris from approaching him and the car in which Shoki is sitting. On the map of the area at the headquarters, it is indicated that the bombing is 100% complete. The operator girl, looking at the monitor, informs the officers about it. Renji Kamigaya, propping his head in his hands, orders the use of drones to estimate the number of monsters killed and find out where the surviving monsters are heading. A cross is visible on the monitor. It is reported that the drones do not show signs of life. The Major General asks in amazement where the surviving monsters could have gone. The cameraman is shocked to say that the monsters are still in the bombing zone. The girl is amazed to declare that the creatures that were in the epicenter of the bombing are completely unharmed. Yet Tanasaki screams that it just can't be. A girl with a drop of sweat dripping down her cheek asks what the drones show. The operator girl taps on the keyboard. Staff officers look at a giant monitor. The monsters are inside huge translucent spheres. It becomes clear that they are surrounded by a protective shield and were completely unharmed by the bomb strike. Someone present draws attention to a person whose head is covered with a hood. Behind this character's back, a long cloak develops. An explosion occurs. Someone shouts that the reconnaissance drones have been attacked by monsters. One of the monsters, emitting deafening screams, looks up. The picture disappears. The monster, clenching its fingers, destroys the drone. The operator girl, looking at the monitor, declares that communication with the aircraft has been lost. Mia frowns that they were aware that this wave of attacks would be different from all previous ones, but she doesn't understand what just happened there. The blonde states in amazement that the monsters seem to know that they were being watched by drones. Nobuo Yuasa grits his teeth in anger. He orders the withdrawal of all detachments from areas that may be attacked. Mia gives the order to retreat. She tells the fighters to hold the line on the walls. The camerawoman says in fright that the monsters are now heading towards the walls. The officers look at the monitor in horror. Mia is frightened and asks where these monsters are headed. The operator points to the monitor, where the arrows are directed to Sector B-22. Mia states that this is exactly where the mysterious hunter went. She orders to send all available drones to the specified sector. Smoke rises over the destroyed buildings. Shoki gets out of the car. He says that the bombing has stopped. Examining his hands, the guy says in amazement that he is alive. Looking at the hero standing in front of him, he laughs, rejoicing that he escaped death. Sora, looking back at the soldier over his shoulder, states that it is too early to have fun, since not only the fighter is alive, but also the monsters. The young man says that the monsters have headed here. The guy notices something to your right. He pushes the soldier to the ground, ordering him to duck. A crash drone lies on the ground. Shoki realizes that this is an army-style aircraft. Staring shocked at the wreckage, he says that the monsters seem to be shooting down drones, and this has never happened before. Sora, looking up, advises the soldier to save his amazement for the future. A huge number of monsters can be seen on the ruins of city buildings. The hero says that guests have come to them. Shoki looks up. He sees the levels above the monsters' heads, and is amazed at how big they are. The soldier states in shock that there have been no monsters stronger in the current wave than those he sees in front of him now. The guy shouts in amazement that the leader of this squad is generally level 90. Shoki looks down. He says that these creatures were not injured at all after the heavy bombing, which means that everything is over for him and the hero. The soldier clutches his head and says that they are going to die here. Sora reminds the soldier that both of them are not injured yet. Smiling, the hero declares that if these creatures cannot be killed with bombs, then he will simply beat them to death with his fists. The guy jumps into the air, ordering his ally to hide in the car. After destroying several monsters along the way, the hero approaches the head of the strongest monster. A green eye glows under the hood. A chain is visible above the hero's head. Sora easily stops the limb the monster was trying to kill him with. The opponent releases the chain from his hand. The projectile falls next to the hero. Sora jumps high into the air. Under the monster's helmet, a brightly glowing eye is visible. The young man raises his fist to strike. He hits the monster in the head. Blood spurts from his neck. Sora spots another opponent in front of her. A blonde man in a long raincoat stands in front of a guy. The hero looks at this man in bewilderment, realizing that he did not feel his presence at all before. The young man, smiling, declares that he has finally found his enemy. Tentacles emerge from under his cloak. These processes are actively moving in the air. It looks like the body of some kind of octopus is hiding under the cloak. The opponent, grinning madly, calls the hero the seed of the abyss. The monster, whose head has grown back, calls the young man an enemy and demands that he return the stolen goods. Sora calmly asks what this strange creature means. A bright light source appears in the blonde's hand. This character declares that the hero must pay with his life for stealing someone else's power. Sora looks down at her feet, where the shark tips are visible. The projectiles approach the hero's head. The guy grabs one of them in his hand. Looking at the enemy, the young man says that if that's all he has, then this weakling may not even expect to win. Sora deploys his new weapon in the direction of the enemy. He looks up. A drone is visible in front of the huge monster. The blonde, with an aircraft hanging over his head, is wary. Frowning to his left, he tries to figure out if Odin's raven is watching him, and then concludes that it is a fake invented by humans. Sora stands inside the monster's giant arm. He tells the blonde that if he wants to kill his enemy, he must take the matter much more seriously. The guy points his weapon at the enemy. It hits something. The tip of the weapon glows. Jets of black energy are visible next to the hero. Sora realizes that his opponent has simply disappeared. The blonde, whose long tentacles are visible in the lower part of his body, declares that he can't stand being watched by vile people. The blonde man, looking at the drone hovering above his head, states that these insignificant creatures are incredibly annoying to him. The young man raises his left hand up. The drone ends up in the clutches of a flying monster. The blonde man orders the destruction of all observers. We see the windows of the building. The drone operator, looking out the window, curses. He says that the monster destroyed his bird. Looking at the screen, the fighter thinks that, nevertheless, he managed to somehow complete his task. The soldier sees the hero standing calmly on the ground in front of him. He realizes that the monsters changed their route because of this guy. The fighter, frowning, looks at the screen, thinking that in front of him is a man who was not afraid to stand alone in front of a wave of monsters. He understands that he must immediately inform his commander about this. Tentacles are visible in the window behind the fighter. The young man pays attention to the door. He sees the limbs of a giant monster in front of him and realizes that he has been discovered. A desperate cry is heard from the building on which the octopuses are climbing. The blonde, laughing vilely, orders his servants to kill everyone they find. Sora looks down sadly. He remembers the face Shoki used to tell him that such a strong hunter could save many lives. Sora then remembers a picture of Shoki risking his life to warn him of the coming bombing. The guy the hero is thinking about now is sitting inside the car, cursing. He declares that something is jammed in the car. In front of us is the lower part of the hero's face. He jumps off the giant monster, realizing that in order to defeat the enemy, he needs to destroy the commander. Sora lands, remembering another immutable rule that if you want to save as many people as possible, you need to destroy enemies, and the faster and more, the better. The eye of the monster, from which the young man has just jumped, glows brightly. The hero protects his face with his hands. Sora looks over the top of his block, thinking that after the monster leader merged with that person, the power of his attacks increased significantly. The young man continues to cover his face with his hands. Standing over the blonde's head, he says that he is very persistent. His opponent frowns up, noticing the impending danger. Sora's face is surprised. He realizes that this guy is incredibly similar to himself. A black sword appears in the blonde's hand. The hero, with wide eyes, looks at the enemy. He feels that the sword emits a powerful flow of energy. The blonde, his eyes sparkling, promises to kill the seed of the abyss. The black weapon is visible right in front of the hero. His opponent shouts loudly that this is the fate that awaits the young man. Sora raises his left hand to strike. He hits the hand of his enemy. The guy takes away the sword. Taking possession of the weapon, he swings to strike. The blonde looks up in fright. The sword falls on him. A character in a cloak is standing somewhere in the distance. Sora realizes that his last attack did not work either. The hero examines the weapon, trying to understand why he was unable to hit the enemy, and assumes that everything was happening in his imagination. In addition, Sora realizes that the power that comes from the weapon is very similar to the one he felt inside the abyss. Gray streams swirl around the hero's enemy. The blonde asks if Sora is really only capable of stealing someone else's weapons. The hero with a sword in his hand stands far below his enemy. He watches in bewilderment as the sword in his hand disappears, and realizes that he sees the power of the abyss. The young man realizes that he does not know everything about how it can be used. A military SUV is visible behind the guy. Sora realizes that it seems that this battle will drag on, and he should try to send the soldier to some safe place. He asks Shoki if he is afraid of heights. The soldier who is sitting inside the car asks again in surprise, and then answers in the affirmative. The fighter clings to the steering wheel. Sora, raising the machine above him, warns that they are about to fly a little. His opponent, whose eyes are shining brightly, calls the guy an idiot and says that the hero should not take the power of the abyss so lightly. A huge dark orb is visible above the blonde's head. He declares that the strong do not exist to protect the weak. Sora looks back at what's going on behind him. He hears that the strong exist to become even stronger. A huge dark projectile rushes in the direction of the car. The blonde shouts that he is about to kill the hero along with the insignificant man whom he decided to protect. Looking up, the young man realizes that the danger is approaching too quickly, and he will not be able to run away from it. Sora puts the car back on the ground. The hero flies up. He shouts that he will just break this sphere. The guy clenches his fist. He strikes, but realizes that he did not hit anything. The ball hangs above the young man's head. Sora thinks she is dealing with a real body. The guy, judging by the look, is aware of something. He curses. Black jets pierce a military SUV. Sora shouts loudly for Shoki to get out of the car. The soldier looks frightened at the black jets and demands that they do not approach. He is told not to be afraid and is called a pathetic lamb. Sora looks on in fright. The car goes up. Shoki hears that he is about to be taken home. The hero flies up to the car, cursing everything in the world. The blonde is already standing on the roof of the car. He asks if the hero is now angry and asks not to worry too much. Sora breaks off 2 dark spikes. Black holes are visible in the soldier's chest. The blonde asks to look at the guy and make sure that he is still alive. The fighter has a smile on his face. The scoundrel who has just cast the necromancy spell offers to make sure that Shoki is very pleased, after which he begins to laugh loudly. The hero, stepping over the thorns, goes to the car. The blonde declares that the seed of the abyss has a truly beautiful fate, and he can watch how his loved ones die. In front of us is the lower part of the hero's face. He remembers being bullied at school and asks the blonde man if he likes to trample on other people's dignity too. The villain, giggling, looks at the strange bundle of energy he holds in his hands. The blonde unleashes a hail of sharp projectiles on the enemy and declares that the guy should not state the obvious. It is reported that he uses the obsidian storm skill. Sharp projectiles crash into the young man. He calmly asks if his opponent is confident in his words. Just below the SUV, there is a bright flash. The hero clenches his fist, preparing to charge. Looking up, he angrily shouts that he is simply sick of such sick idiots. The car, hanging over the guy's head, falls on its side. Sora looks at the enemy angrily. Once on the roof of the car, he grabs a falling soldier. Red lights shine in the fighter's eyes. Thin black jets are visible around its body. Sora looks to her left. He sees Shoki sitting in the car and realizes that the guy was drawn into this whole story because of him. The blonde man stands behind the hero. Sora rushes into the attack with his left hand forward. He strikes and hits the villain in the chest. The blonde, who has a sword in his hand, declares that the layman, who cannot control the power of the abyss, cannot hope to win this fight. In the next second, he receives a powerful blow to the eye. The guy flies away and falls to the ground. A cloud of white smoke rises above it. Something strange happens to the hero's hand. He declares that the blonde cannot be considered a worthy opponent for him. The bastard is seen under a huge monster. He says in bewilderment that this is simply impossible. Looking at the hero in fright, he says that he does not understand how he was able to hurt him. Sora, rushing into another attack, declares that people tend to develop, after which she calls her enemy a moron. Gritting his teeth with anger, he declares that all this is very bad. The dark figure of the young man is visible under a huge monster. The blonde, looking angrily at the guy, asks if he, watching other people's movements, was able to learn to control the power of the abyss. Standing on the shoulder of a giant monster, he asks where the young man has gone. Sora flies up to the enemy from above. He jumps off the monster and, flying down, says that the guy is a much more serious rival than he thought. The hero, angrily looking at the enemy, says that he can run from him, but now they will see how he avoids the next blow. A wide white trail is visible in the air, and a powerful explosion is heard between the building and the giant monster. The black mass is smoking. A tiny figure of the hero is seen next to the monster's head. The guy thinks that this technique was used against him again. With her mouth wide open, Sora shouts that in this case she will aim for the core. We see the guy's hands. The hero rains down a huge number of dark jets on the monster. He shouts that he will crush this creature. Arms wide apart, Sora flies down, the monster unable to believe what has happened. Black jets dissolve under the bright sun. Fire devours the dark substance. Behind the hero's back you can see fire. His eyes emit an evil glow. Looking at the blonde man nearby, Sora states that he will be next. The villain raises a brown sphere above his head, curses, and declares that he will remember it, after which he uses the Shadow Unity skill. Terrible monsters appear in front of the hero. Monsters are visible in the air and on the ground. The entire space is filled with jets of red and black energy. Sora defends itself by placing a block in front of it. The young man notices something. A white whirlwind swirls above his head. Looking up in bewilderment, the hero states that it seems that the blonde man only used this powerful technique to escape. He throws off his outerwear, sadly stating that it has become completely unusable. Looking at the family photo, the young man says that he is very glad that it has been preserved. Sora opens the car door and, looking at the deceased Shoki, thinks that this guy must have been waiting for his family at home too. The hero tears off the soldier's personal token. The soldier lies on the ground. Sora clutches his dog tag to her chest and decides to take it with her. The guy remembers the blonde and realizes that he will probably meet this scoundrel again. The hero realizes that he has absorbed a huge number of shadows and can attack at any time. In the memory of the young man, the vile face of the enemy and his words that the hero has a wonderful fate, as he can watch how people dear to him die. Sora imagines a blonde man and people impaled on spikes. He realizes that he can't let this bastard get to the shelter first. Sora rushes forward. He thinks he should be there first. A drone is lying on the ground. It flies into the air. Nya Tanasaki, who leads the squad, orders the drone operators to investigate the area so thoroughly that not even a mouse can slip past them. She tells all other soldiers to remain extremely vigilant. The soldiers make their way through the ruins with difficulty. The fighter, looking at the screen, says that he wants to report monsters. The girl stands on a pile of stones. She declares that she already knows everything. Nya looks down in amazement. She sees many corpses and declares that all the monsters have been defeated. Looking back, the blonde orders to review the recordings made by the drones and report if there is anything important there. The fighter confirms receipt of the order. Nya sees the corpse of a giant monster in front of her. She thinks that there are clear signs of a battle that has taken place, and assumes that the powerful hunter mentioned by Lieutenant Kumagaya not only survived the bombing, but also destroyed an entire army of monsters. One of the soldiers, raising his hand, calls for the director. He points his finger at the drone and states that the memory card of this device is still in good condition. The fighter reports that he can extract visual data. The soldier holds the screen up to the blonde, who looks at him. Nya sees the hero and the soldier who was with him. She realizes that Private First Class Matsura drove a car into the bombing zone, and the man standing next to him is most likely the strongest hunter. The fighters approach a huge dark object. One of them sees a bright purple glow. The young man discovers the trophies, and the system informs him that he has found a special energy potion that permanently increases the user's magical power, an A-grade weapon called the Ancient Royal Dagger, and one item that cannot be identified. The second soldier looks at the soldier from above. He asks what he found. Clutching the box to his chest, the fighter shouts that there was nothing here. His colleague demands not to lie to him. The second soldier jumps down, frightening the first. Smiling, he looks at the guy who found the trophies and states that it seems that very rare artifacts fell out of the boss. Looking menacingly at the fighter, the young man says that it is a crime to appropriate items that the unit has obtained. He asks if his colleague knows about it. Clutching the trophies to his chest, the guy looks frightened at a member of his squad. Frowning, he asks how he proposes to divide the loot. Smiling, the soldier asks his comrade to relax, after which he declares that he only needs a cube. The second soldier puts his hands on the shoulders of the first, and, looking him straight in the eyes, declares that the guy has no choice. With the cube in hand, the soldier looks after the departing member of his squad. The young man's eyes glow. He declares that he has finally obtained Golem Relic. Skyscrapers are visible on the horizon. Sora thinks that he is finally in Vault Number 6. Soldiers stand next to the cannon. Cars are passing by and people are walking below. The young man thinks that, apparently, this place has not yet been attacked by monsters. An unpleasant man squints at the hero. He walks among people with a naked torso, causing everyone's bewilderment. Sora remembers the blonde man he recently fought, and realizes that she doesn't feel his presence in her vicinity. The hero, listening to his feelings, realizes that he does not feel any strong hunters around him at all. While he understands that if there are no good fighters here, then the shelter will be destroyed sooner or later. A young man in a huge hat approaches the guy. The hero looks at him, trying to understand whether he is really blind in front of him. The guy, smiling, utters a strange phrase that the young man has thick blood, and assumes that he came from somewhere far away. Sora confirms this assumption. Raising his hands, the young man, who is wearing a blindfold, declares that in this case he has found the one he needs. He takes banknotes out of his wallet, and assures the hero that he does not mean anything bad. The young man says that he only needs information from his grace about what is happening in the outside world. Demonstrating the folded money, the guy says that this data means a lot to him. Sora looks at the money between his fingers in bewilderment, trying to figure out what the local currency is. He states that of course he will tell everything he knows. The guy in the hat says that he is very glad to hear this. He lifts the money as if he is ready to give it to the hero right now. Sora states that he wants to ask something first. The guy silently listens to his interlocutor. Sora, looking into the face of her new acquaintance, declares that monks usually do not call anyone his grace, which means that the young man is most likely pretending to be someone. The guy, smiling, declares that the hero is very perceptive, and he wears different costumes, as this is his hobby. Sora, pointing to her eyes, asks if blindfolding is one of the young man's hobbies. Raising his right hand, the guy laughs. He understands that this interlocutor can cause him trouble. Pulling off the bandage, the young man says that he recently caught an eye disease. Looking at him, the hero thinks that the guy is lying, and even when his eyes were closed, he felt a terrifying light. Sora looks at the young man intently, thinking that he must have some reason to hide his power. He realizes that a wolf in sheep's clothing is hiding in vault number 6. Raising his left hand, the hero asks what information his interlocutor wants to know. He happily says that it seems that it is his turn to ask questions. Pointing his finger up, the guy says that he wants to know what is going on outside. Soldiers are marching along the walls. Sora reports that the fighters are holding the line and seem to be preparing for some kind of battle. Smiling hunters walk the streets. The hero says that it seems that ordinary people did not notice this, but he himself heard the sound of an explosion outside the city. The interlocutors stand opposite each other. The guy asks if the hero has any assumptions about what is happening behind the walls of the shelter. Stroking the back of his head, Sora states that, to be honest, he himself is not exactly sure, and that he was running an errand when he heard an explosion somewhere in the southwest. The hero says that he was frightened, lost a letter, and had to use his shirt to draw a map. The guy in the hat asks in bewilderment how this could happen. He realizes that the hero is also hiding his power. The young man hands the hero money, asks if the explosion was really in the southwest, after which he says that the information was very useful. Sora asks not to thank him. The hero frowns at the guy leaving him. He realizes that he seems to have gone to check his incredibly scarce information alone. Sora looks thoughtfully after the young man as he leaves, trying to figure out how many soldiers of this caliber are here, and realizes that the picture of what is happening in this city does not yet form a clear picture in his head. Sora walks down the street. Looking around, he realizes that he looks very suspicious, but at the same time no one asks him unnecessary questions. The guy assumes that the law enforcement officers are very calm about people, since they are all currently fighting a common and very dangerous enemy. The hero looks over his shoulder at the soldier. In front of us is a shop window. Someone invites the hero to come in more often. Sora is standing in new clothes. He thinks that he managed to dress with the money that the monk gave him. A young man is walking down the street. He thinks that the time has come to look for his parents. Looking at the photo, he decides to resort to the old-fashioned method first. Sora taps the long-haired girl on the shoulder and asks her for forgiveness. He shows the photo and asks if the beauty recognizes any of the people in the picture. Amazement appears on the blonde's face. With a wave of her hand, she walks away, declaring that she doesn't know anyone. Sora looks after her in surprise, realizing that the girl reacted as if she saw a ghost. The young man does not understand why everyone in this city is so nervous. Behind the hero's back, you can see a guy who brazenly advises someone to be more careful. Sora understands that he will have to ask this young man as well. The guy himself calls out to the hero. Sora looks at him with glowing eyes and asks what he needs. Boldly looking at the hero, the guy declares that he does not seem to be a local. Pointing his finger at the picture, the young man says that some stupid person in the middle of the night is pestering passers-by with a photo. Then he asks in which century the hero is stuck. Sora, showing the picture, asks if the young man knows any of the people depicted in it, who is outraged by the fact that the hero is now poking his picture in his face as well. The guy asks in amazement where the hero got this photo. Sora asks if the young man recognized someone. Looking suspiciously at the hero, the guy asks what business he can have with these people. Sora claims that he is their son. We see the face of the hero at the present time and when he was a child. The young man asks in amazement if his interlocutor is really in the picture. He then indignantly says that the hero seems to be mocking him. A truck is driving down the street. He approaches the young man from behind. The car crashes into the guy's back. His interlocutor puts his hands in front of him in horror. The driver of the car looks in amazement at the hero shaking off his jacket. Sora apologizes to the guy, states that he did not hear what he said, and asks to repeat. A curly-haired guy with an idiotic smile on his face is trying to tie the words together into something articulate. Raising his index finger, he shouts that this means that this is really the man's son, and declares that they have not seen each other for a long time. The young man points to his left and says that if the hero walks along this road, he will easily find the house in which the people from the photo live. After thanking the guy, the hero leaves. He asks the young man to take care of himself. Pretending to smile, the young man waves his hand. He rushes to run, thinking that everything is very bad, and he must gather everyone. The hero walks down the street, thinking that some bandit knows where his parents live. Sora remembers his father, and how he was kind to everyone he met. The sons stand next to their mother. The hero thinks that she had the same pleasant character, and that in this world everyone tries to use such people for their own purposes. The young man clenches his fist. He is determined to correct everything in the lives of his relatives that does not suit him. Sora stands on the sidewalk, realizing that she seems to have come to the right place. In front of him is the gate of a rich house. The guy cannot believe that his parents live here. Sora is standing in front of a closed gate. He assumes that many people must have left the city, and there were enough empty houses in it. The young man knocks on the door. From behind it comes the question of whether the work is finished. The hero smiles, recognizing the voice of his father. A man, with his arms outstretched, greets the one he expected to see at home. A tear runs down the hero's cheek. The man looks at the guy in bewilderment and asks who he is. Sora states that he is back. Father asks again, perplexed. The guy, shedding tears, says that his name is Sora, and he is back. The man looks at his son in shock. Father and son are sitting at a low table. The hero's mother enters the door. She apologizes for keeping you waiting. The woman sits down at the table and asks why the men have not yet exchanged a single word. The hero's father says that he cannot believe in the return of his son, since in front of him is a completely different person who does not even resemble Sora. The man, folding his arms on his chest, declares that in such times something is needed. Sora asks in surprise what it is about. The father looks into his son's eyes and declares that he means the exchange of secrets that only the two of them can know. The man does not want his wife to find out anything unnecessary, but he thinks that if this guy does not give him the right answers, he will not leave here unpunished. The man looks to his left. The one to whom this gaze is addressed understands that if the hero does at least something suspicious, he must be killed immediately. Through a crack in the ceiling, a young man in a mask watches the interlocutors. He understands what he must do. Sora, looking up, realizes that his father's henchman is out there somewhere, and realizes that his parents still doesn't trust him. The hero's father stands in front of his son. He thinks that the security is reliable enough, so you can relax. The man asks what the young man is up to. Sora, smiling, thinks that his parents' henchman can now hear a lot of unexpected things for himself. The young man's mother drinks tea. He states that every weekend his father attended a cooking club at the Housewives' Club. The man is shocked. He does not understand how his son can know such things. Watching the scene, the fighter imagines his bloodthirsty leader with a knife in his hands. The hero, meanwhile, declares that every week his father managed to get out to ballet classes. The fighter imagines a man in a snow-white ballet tutu. The young man's father frowns over his shoulder. His henchman seems to be experiencing animal terror. A hole is visible in the ceiling, through which a masked man is watching what is happening. The man, pretending to smile, declares that perhaps the guy is telling the truth, but not only his son could know these facts. Smiling, Sora declares that she has more amazing things to tell. His father, looking at his potential son with interest, asks what he knows. Looking at his parent, the hero warns that the facts may be unexpected. Sweat rolls down his father's cheeks, but he asks the young man to put everything clean. The guy, pointing his finger to his left, states that one of the katanas they see is a replica. A soldier who listens to the conversation does not believe his ears. The man, looking at the young man in fright, tells him to stop talking nonsense that cannot be proven in any way. Sora, picking up a sword, states that there are marks on the hilt from his brother's teeth. The man's henchman imagines a rather strange picture, and recalls that his boss told everyone that these marks were left after he was forced to hold the weapon with his teeth, as his hands were tied, after which he killed 38 enemies. Sora draws her katana from its scabbard. The fighter raises his right hand. He thinks that the guy is describing everything very beautifully, but now the young man can take out a weapon and cut off the head of the family. The hero touches the tip of the blade to his palm. The fighter understands that the blade of the weapon has moved. Sora pushes the blade back and says loudly that he seems to walk freely in both directions, the man calling his son an idiot. He looks around in surprise. The father, hugging his son, shouts that they all thought the guy was dead. Shedding tears, he yells that it is indeed Sora, and he returns home. Putting his hands on his son's shoulders, the man says that he has no idea what they all had to go through. The hero looks at his father in shock, who states that they searched all over the area in search of the hero, and then he, without expecting it, became the boss. Streams of tears pour from the man's eyes. He declares that now this same boss is crying like a child, and this is an absolutely pitiful sight. The father asks his son to lower the man who is under the roof. The fighter in question looks shocked at what is happening. He remembers the brutal look on his boss's face, as well as the fact that all he did was spill someone's blood. The man sobs uncontrollably, clinging to his son's chest, his subordinate realizing that he has never seen anything like it. The soldier begins to panic. He realizes that he saw the head of the family, who values his honor above all else, in a completely miserable state, and that he needs to get out of here before he is killed as an unwanted witness. A soldier crawls on the roof. The hero, breaking through the boards with his hand, grabs him by one of the limbs and asks him not to hurry. The guy looks back at the hero in horror. He declares that his father wants to talk to his subordinate. The moon is shining over the house. Family members and a fighter are sitting at a table. Frowning, the young man's father says that Oki has the most chatty tongue among all his guards. Sora, smiling, states that if what the young man saw, anyone will know. Father and son finish the sentence together, warning that the soldier will not be kindled. Squeezing his eyes shut, Oki states that he vows not to say a word. Sora and his father look predatorily at the guy, who realizes that these two are undoubtedly father and son. The young man's mother, holding a cup of tea in her hands, asks that her relatives not threaten this young man. Rolling her eyes, Oki looks at the woman as if only she can save him. Smiling, she says that the guy should not utter a single word. Oki bows low and declares that he understands. Looking at his wife, the man says that he is very glad that Sora did not say that his father snores and gasses when he sleeps. The woman, smiling, states that her husband has just spilled the beans himself. Sora looks to his right, feeling as if he has climbed out of the abyss again. The young man's mother smiles happily. He realizes that he feels at home again. Anxiety appears in the hero's eyes. A young man bursts into the room and calls for his boss. Behind him there are many fighters of a very unpleasant appearance. One of them states that some guy with white hair was looking for the man. The soldiers look in shock at the picture before their eyes. Sora, looking over her shoulder, asks if he is the blonde man just mentioned. The curly-haired young man looks at the young man in shock. He shouts in horror that this is the same hunter. Pointing at the hero with his finger, he yells that the young man can be very strong, but a whole squad is ready to fight him. The young man's knees are shaking, however, he boldly asks if the hero is really going to do something to their boss, after which he suggests that the guy may be from Tiger's Roar Guild. Sora grabs the guy's legs to stop the trembling. He looks down on the fighter. Turning to his father sitting at the table, the young man asks why he does not introduce him to his people. Smiling, the man declares that in front of his fighters is Sora, his son, who has been absent for 5 years and today has finally returned. Looking into his cup, the man intends to communicate his son's level. He is completely perplexed, realizing that he has no idea what figure to give him now. Sora calmly declares that he does not have a system. The fighters ask in amazement. A big man with black hair asks if the young man managed to survive in the destroyed zone for 5 years without having a system. The curly-haired guy looks at the hero in shock. He states that without the system, he would not have been able to rise above level 10, no matter how hard he trained. Sora, smiling, looks at the fighter. One of the guys, frowning at the previous speaker, reproaches him for talking all the time about how strong this guy is. But in fact he turned out to be a rookie who doesn't even have a system. Drops of sweat flow down the curly-haired fighter's face. He, nervously giggling, declares that he must have been mistaken. The young man recalls Sora shaking off his clothes after being hit by a truck, and he can't understand how the inexperienced rookie was able to withstand the impact without sustaining any damage. The hero silently looks at the fighter. Smiling, he asks if the guy wants to determine his level with his system. The guy asks again, surprised? Closing his eyes, he declares that the hero does not have a system, so he does not possess even the most well-known information. Raising his index finger, the guy states that the owners of the system can see the levels of monsters. Closing his eyes, he reports that it is impossible to determine the levels of other people without the inspect skill. The hero's father, sitting at the table, declares that not everyone has the inspect skill. The curly-haired fighter remembers that it is his boss who has it. Sora, looking at his parent, asks him to determine the level of his son in this case. The guy looks down sadly. He wants to get a little different information, namely about the abyss. The moon is shining in the sky. The hero stands in front of his father, who has raised his index finger. Sora asks the mother standing next to her if she is going to check on her son too. Closing her eyes, the woman says that it is enough for her that her boy is next to her. The hero's father and his subordinates look shocked at the system window. The man says thoughtfully that with all his efforts, he gets the same result. A blue rectangle is visible between the father and son. The man says that he cannot extract information. Frowning to his right, the young man's father states that there are only 2 explanations for this. Either it is because Sora does not have a system, or his level is too high for anyone to identify him. The soldiers look at the man in shock. Above the hero's head hangs a system window with the designation of the name and surname. His father states that, despite the fact that the guy does not have a system, some data about him is still visible, and in addition, the guy was able to survive alone for 5 years. The hero and his mother look at the man, who declares that his son would have been dead long ago if he had been a novice who could not do anything, which means that he has such a high level that it is not even definable. We see the hero's face. His mother asks what he has been doing for the past 5 years. Smiling sadly, the woman says that in any case, they should be happy, because they met again. She states that Sora is a very strong boy. Touching her son's cheek with her hand, the woman says that he must have gone through real hell to come back. The hero, almost crying, looks at his mother. He remembers what happened to him in the abyss. There are tears in the young man's eyes. Holding his mother's head to his chest, he says that everything is already fine and he has returned home, so she should not cry. The woman sheds streams of tears. A smile appears on the face of the hero's father. He takes his subordinates out of the room. The big man walking in front looks around. The man kicks the fighters out, stating that they should not interfere with the mother and child who met after a very long separation. The hero's father raises his right hand. Looking at his fighters, he asks where Jiro and the other guys are now. The man states that it's been 2 hours and they still haven't returned. The moon hangs over the trees. Sora asks her mother what happened to his brother. He looks at the woman, fearing that she will report Rika's death. The mother, taking out the phone, declares that the hero's brother is fine, and he rarely comes home because he serves in the army. The woman offers to call and report that the hero has returned home. Riku is seen on the phone screen. The mother reports that her son is fighting on the front lines all the time, and it seems that he wants to avenge his brother. The hero remembers his past. He declares that he has not seen Riku for a very long time. Looking at his mother, the young man says that she seems to occupy a high position in the organization headed by his father. A woman, smiling, says that she has a certain status. An old man with a rod is seen above her head. She declares that the fighters believe her because she is a cleric, that is, a healer who can provide powerful support on the battlefield and even see prophecies. Sora asks if his mother can see information about him. She touches the young man's cheek and reminds him that representatives of her profession can predict the future. Smiling happily, the mother tells her son that she knew he would return one day. The full moon shines over the roof. A man in sunglasses peeks through the door and asks who it is. He sees a bearded man in front of him and realizes that he is the deputy head. The hero's father, with his arms wide apart, greets the bearded man. It is reported that we are facing Jiro Iwashima, vice president of United Guilds. Smiling, the young man's father asks why his deputy is so dissatisfied. Putting his hand to his mouth, the man asks if something has happened. He says that he sent someone to investigate, and asks what these people managed to find out. Jiro frowns that the Tiger's Roar Guild is connected to the army. As he thought, the bearded man states that they, as always, brought the corpses of monsters to the representatives of the military. But then some strange man with a laptop appeared, who began to find fault with the corpses of monsters. An obnoxious man states that the corpses are too damaged for him to accept. Jiro reveals that the man ended up paying only half of the points attached, and then informed his bosses that he had paid the full price. We see the hunters grinning. Jiro reports that he was able to figure out that all the difference went in favor of Tiger's Roar Guild. The hero's father displeased declares that he understands. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, the man thinks that if Tiger's Roar Guild, which is supposed to be neutral, is pulling off such tricks, then there is clearly something more behind it. He tells his subordinates that they cannot silently watch what is happening, as it will affect the future of the city. The man looks at Jiro and advises him to eat well and rest. A ghostly sword can be seen under the hand of the young man's father. He says that he will visit Tiger's Roar Guild and solve all the problems that have arisen. Pointing at himself with his thumb, the man states that they must show that united guilds are not naive sheep that can be easily fooled. The hero looks down thoughtfully, mentally repeating the name of Tiger's Roar Guild. A young man is sitting next to his mother. He thinks that thanks to the Black Shard, all his senses are working at the limit, and now he is able to hear conversations at a very decent distance. The guy thinks that Ag Kagawa and the robbers he met were also connected to Tiger's Roar Guild. Sora looks over his shoulder. He realizes that his father is going to go to negotiate with this guild and is worried about his parent. Jiro, passing by the door, notices the hero. The young man, smiling, declares that he will go with his father. The curly-haired guy thinks that if this guy is going to take part in this case, he might show his true strength. Jiro, looking at the hero in surprise, asks who it is in front of him. A mother stands behind her son. The father, raising his left hand, asks for permission to introduce his offspring and reports that in front of Jiro, his son Sora, who disappeared in the destroyed zone for 5 years, the bearded man asks what level the young man has if he could hold out there for such a long time. The hero's father, smiling, declares that Sora does not have a system. Jiro looks at his boss in amazement. Looking at the guy in bewilderment, he says that this means that the young man is the most ordinary person. The man thinks that without the system, the young man would die in any shelter in a maximum of 3 days. Sora silently looks at the bearded man, who thinks that it is possible to survive there for some time if he has excellent parameters and excellent survival skills. However, without a profession, the guy would die during the first fight, which happens in such places all the time. Jiro, smiling, tells the young man's father that he is very happy for him, then states that the young man must be very tired and should stay home at least today. Looking at his deputy, the hero's father declares that he seems to be right, and tells his son to stay at home with his mother. The woman takes her son into one of the rooms and says that his father has come up with a good idea, since she hasn't even shown the guy the whole house yet. Sora lowers his gaze, thinking about how he doesn't seem to be perceived as a useful combat unit, and that this is perhaps to be expected, as he is only a normal human with no system. Dropping his hands, the guy is lost in thought. He realizes that he still has not made a complete picture of what is happening in this shelter. Sora thinks that if there really is a monster hiding here, he should refrain from showing his true abilities for a while, so as not to attract unnecessary attention to his parents. Closing his eyes, the young man says that he will probably agree to stay at home. The curly-haired fighter is clearly disappointed. He understands that he missed the opportunity to see the true strength of the hero. The young man's father loudly declares that it's time to go. He goes at the head of the squad. Sora watches after the departing fighters. The mother tells her son not to be offended, and assures him that his father is just taking care of him. Smiling, the woman says that the family has just been reunited after a long separation, and its head does not want his son to be in danger. Sora tries to object. The woman pats him on the head, assuring him that the guy's father will be fine, as he is very strong. She says that she constantly uses her ability to look into the future, and now she is sure that her husband will return home safely. The hero irritably throws his mother's hand off his head and tells her that he is no longer a child. The guy looks down thoughtfully. He thinks that his mother can use her abilities to foresee the future, but the Tiger's Roar Guild is connected to the army, and his father will have to conflict with both of these sides in any case. The young man frowns and asks how things are at the hideout right now, and why Tiger's Roar Guild is on bad terms with United Guilds. The mother replies that after Judgment Day, The awakened founded the hunter guilds and began working with the military to manage the hideouts, and then her husband founded united guilds and assisted the army in Vault 6 to be able to search for his son. The woman, smiling, recalls the events of the past. She says that united guilds became a large organization because people believed her husband's promises to find their missing family members. The hero stands half-turned to his mother, who reports that united guilds maintained order in the city, delivered supplies to the battlefields and destroyed monsters, while the army was responsible for eliminating breakthroughs and clearing towers. She says that her husband is a very kind man, so he did not want his subordinates to do too dangerous work. The woman's face is sad. She says that this is how they have managed to keep the peace over the past 4 years. Looking at her son, she reveals that a few months ago, the Tiger's Roar Guild, a large organization from Vault 4, appeared in their city and founded its branch. Behind the hero's mother, 2 dark figures are visible. She states that after this the conflicts do not stop. Sora asks why the army does not intervene in these disputes. The woman replies that the monsters are becoming more and more dangerous, and the military does not have the strength to be distracted by extraneous matters. The hero looks thoughtfully in front of him. He hears that Tiger's Roar Guild originally aimed to clear the towers, so it has become much stronger than the army, and the military now has no choice but to rely on the hunters from this organization. The woman says that the information that the Tiger's Roar Guild provides after clearing the towers is too important for the military to lose this source of data, and on top of that, the Tiger's Roar Guild has an awakened one chosen by the tower deity. Above the head of the hero's mother, a gray-haired old man is visible. She declares that this is the real trump card of Tiger's Roar Guild. Sora, looking at her mother, asks for more details. The woman frowns that the Esra are the lords of the towers, and their power in the eyes of ordinary people is quite comparable to the divine. The woman states that a person who passes the test of the deity becomes an Esra and is endowed with divine power. Closing her eyes, the woman says that people consider these characters to be messengers of the gods and, in addition, they become guardians inside the towers. The mother informs her son that Tiger's Roar Guild now has the largest number of Esra. A map of the city is visible above the woman's head. She states that since each Esra has incredible power, Tiger's Roar Guild very quickly absorbs all competing guilds. Sighing heavily, the woman says that the locals love united guilds very much, but she was never able to clear a single tower, and now only this guild continues to exist without a single Esra in its ranks. Sora says the situation, as far as he understands, is desperate. Looking at his mother, the guy asks why, if the locals love united guilds so much, its members behave like some yakuza. The woman, smiling, says that it was her wish, with which her husband agreed. Sora looks at her giggling mother in surprise. The hero stands in the doorway. The woman optimistically declares that no one complains that their fighters look like this. The mother pushes her son in the back, stating that he must be tired. She suggests that he go take a shower. Closing the door behind her, the woman says that if the guy needs to rub his back, he can call her. Sora indignantly replies that she will do everything himself. The mother states that the guy seems to have really grown up. The young man is standing in the middle of the room. He closes his eyes. Thin lines can be seen around him. Sora is glad that his mother finally left him alone. A window is visible in front of the guy. The hero thinks that the situation that was described to him is very serious, so he cannot help but worry about the life of his father. Sora opens the window. He rushes forward at a rapid pace. The mother sees her son flying outside the window. Smiling, she thinks that she advised the guy to rest, and he ignored her. The woman recalls that she always had a lot of trouble with children. Sakuya, Sora's father, goes to Tiger's Roar Guild with members of united guilds. The hero, standing on the roof, looks at the city. He understands that only the center is illuminated. It seems to him that this is good, because it will be even easier to find the way. The guy looks thoughtfully into the distance. The figures of the people begin to blur. Sora cannot understand why he is dizzy. The guy rubs his eyes, thinking that since a shard of the abyss hit him, he has never even caught a cold. The hero has a bewilderment on his face. He hears someone call him the seed of the abyss, and promises to find him. Sora is standing on the roof. He recognizes the voice in his head. A hooded blonde appears behind the young man. The hero tries to understand whether his opponent is hiding his presence, and realizes that he does not feel it at all. The guy, cursing, says that this bastard did sneak into vault number 6. Sora is holding his head. He is very dizzy. The silhouettes of the buildings blur. The young man hears again that he is the seed of the abyss, and he will not be allowed to escape. The hero holds a palm in front of his face. He learns that he was marked by his opponent. The blonde's head is visible right next to the young man. Sora takes this as a chance to deal with the enemy. A bright flash is visible behind the hero's back. His hand pierces the blonde's head. Sora realizes that she is dealing with an illusion, and again hears that he is the seed of the abyss, and he will not be allowed to escape. Behind the guy's back, you can see the opponent's inverted head. The blonde repeats the phrase that he marked the soul of the hero. Sora tries to comprehend the meaning of what he heard. The bastard, with his mouth wide open, repeats the phrase about the impossibility of salvation. Sora is standing on the roof, clutching her head, someone shouting loudly what this idiot is doing there at this time of night. The young man raises his right hand. He realizes that he shouted loudly and attracted attention to himself. Someone from below demands that he come down. Cursing everything, Sora jumps off the roof. The guy rushes forward rapidly. He realizes that the illusion is gone. He lands on his legs wide apart. Next to him, the head of the blonde is again visible, who repeats the same words about the seed of the abyss. The hero covers his face from the bright light. He realizes that the scoundrel has disappeared under the bright rays. A full moon is visible above the young man's head. He decides to test his theory. Sora stands under a bright street lamp. The guy looks down. It seems to him that he has begun to understand the principle of the illusion. The hero measures his pulse, thinking that when he is in the dark for 7 seconds, the soul mark is activated and he begins to feel dizzy. And when he loses his temper, the blonde's phrases change. The guy looks to his left. He again hears the tired words about the fact that his soul has already been marked. The young man squints at the blonde's head next to him, and realizes that only he himself sees this illusion. A girl passing by, looking shocked at the hero, says that he seems to have 8th grader syndrome that imitates anime characters. Sora walks down the street, clutching his head. He realizes that when he passes under a light source, grinding noises sound in his head, and after a while, the mark disappears, and he stops seeing the blonde. Sora walks forward with her right arm raised. He remembers sitting at the table and assumes that he hadn't seen this bastard before because it was light in the house where he was. The guy concludes that his hypothesis is correct. A blonde man appears next to him, who repeats the phrase about the seed of the abyss. Sora remembers his opponent, whose eyes are shining brightly. The hero understands that this bastard is most likely able to figure out where he is and unexpectedly attack, so vigilance should not be lost in any case. Sora looks up somewhere, thinking that he must find his father anyway. The young man does not look at the blonde's head, hanging next to his shoulder, and repeating his mantra that the hero will not be able to hide. The girl looks back in amazement at the young man, who asks his interlocutor, invisible to others, to shut up. Sora walks along the sidewalk. A car passes next to him with headlights on. The light falls on the young man. He realizes that he was right, and the blonde does not appear when there is lighting. The hero looks thoughtfully ahead. He realizes that if, as his mother said, united guilds is no longer of particular importance to the military, then his father may be in mortal danger. The guy remembers the monk in the hat. He does not know how strong the hunters in hideout number 6 are, but he does not believe that the army, having allied with the Tiger's Roar Guild, will sit idly by. It seems to him that there is a high probability that this combined force will try to destroy united guilds. The young man's eyes glow. We see his hand. Sora thinks that he will protect his family, even if it means killing someone. The hero stops. Looking down sadly, he thinks that perhaps tranquility will never return to this world again. The guy sees a large crowd in front of him. Hiding behind a pole, he watches what is happening, realizing that he has come to the right place. The young man looks out of his hiding place, trying to understand how his father will negotiate. Sora recalls how as a child, his father told him that in any conflict, violence should be used only as a last resort. A man strokes his son's head. The young man looks to his right, wondering if his father will refrain from violence even in this situation. Sora notices something. A young man in sunglasses demands that someone get out of the way and declares that everything is beginning. Sakuya takes a sword in his hand. One of the spectators remembers that the boss has not used his weapon for a long time. The hero's father, whose eyes are shining, looks very menacing. One of the fighters recalls that the last time the man left a 20-meter scar on his opponent. Sakuya shouts out Suchida's name loudly and demands that the man come out to him. The man draws his sword from its scabbard. His weapon leaves a bright white trail in the air, Sakuya yelling for his opponent to fight him. Sharp stones fly up. The head of the guild, judging by the expression on his face, is very determined. Jiro Iwashima frowns at what is happening. The hero opens his mouth wide. He does not understand what is happening here. A sword mark is visible on the building. Sakuya sheathing her weapons. The hero puts his hand on the shoulder of one of the fighters. Raising his left hand, he asks if the boss has always been so short-tempered. The young man, smiling, replies that he always rushes into battle right away. Sora wonders if the man has never said that violence is the most extreme measure. The hunter in sunglasses replies that at first he thought so, but at the time there was hope that the military would be able to remedy the situation. The guy, smiling, declares that a lot has happened since then, and now the army turns a blind eye to minor skirmishes if the hunters do their job and the civilians do not die of hunger. The young man, clenching his fist, declares that this is why resolving disputes with his fists is the fastest and most reliable way. He declares that if victory is impossible, then there is no point in negotiations. Sakuya stands in front of the damaged building. The young man says that now everyone adheres to the tactic of first hitting and then talking about something. Sora is lost in thought. He remembers a monk whose behavior he deduces that strong fighters in this hideout usually try to avoid problems. The hero looks at his father, who is at the head of the squad. He thinks that either he doesn't fully understand everything, or people who are as strong as Sakuya can do anything. Sora, remembering the monk, suggests that he blindfolded himself for this reason. The figure of the man the young man is thinking about is visible on top of a high-rise building. Helicopters fly next to him. Level 75 Arhit Yukio Shizenji stands with his right arm raised. He is reported to be using the Keen Eye skill. Soldiers are standing in front of the huge corpse. The monk realizes that the level 90 boss looks like he has been torn apart, and there are no traces of heavy weapons or anything like that on the torso. Yukio Shizenji blindfolds and transforms into a level 45 monk. He says that he is just frightened by the fact that there are so many strong hunters down there. The fighter believes that he should tread carefully. Smoke rises over the dilapidated building. Sakuya frowns ahead. Someone calls out his last name. An unpleasant man comes out to him, followed by fighters. He calls the hero's father a bastard and asks if the head of the guild really lives at the time when the shelters were just beginning to be built. Sakuya angrily states that the situation, of course, has changed, as alien scum have appeared in his city. Sakuya, placing his hand on his sword, declares that he should have exterminated these scoundrels a long time ago. Tsuchida, smiling menacingly, asks why the man doesn't do it right now and states that his opponent is simply afraid. Sakuya, looking at his opponent, states that he is behaving too impudently and it is impossible to turn a blind eye to this. The blade of his weapon emits jets of blue energy. Tsuchida, gritting her teeth, looks at the man. A dark silhouette is visible behind him. The villain thinks that he has sufficiently provoked Sakuya, and his allies should have already appeared. Then he realizes that he needs to arrange some more provocation. Pointing his finger at Sakuya, he declares that he is a coward who is even afraid to take his sword out of its scabbard. With his mouth wide open, Tsuchida shouts that United Guild should be food for Tiger's Roar Guild, Sakuya calling him scum. He draws his sword and charges. Tsuchida holds out a shield in front of him. In front of us is a grinning man. He realizes that the head of the guild has swallowed the bait. He shouts loudly that Sakuya should not get any closer again. A man in military uniform appears behind Tsuchida. It is reported that in front of us is Osamu Yujui, a level 63 assassin. He states that only a person with nerves of steel can arrange a massacre in the hideout. The hunters from United Guilds are amazed. One of them says that the representative of the army sided with the Tiger's Roar Guild. The second asks what this man is doing here. Sora, frowning at what is happening, realizes that it cannot be a coincidence that the military supports a member of the Tiger's Roar Guild. The guy, looking at the building, feels that there are quite a decent number of people inside. Osamu usually smirks. Sora now has no doubt that this is no coincidence. Above Tsuchida's head, a ghostly woman with wings is visible. The hero's father frowns up. He realizes that the army is indeed defending the Tiger's Roar Guild. Osamu Yujui, who is holding a tablet in his hand, says that according to Article 15 of the Protocol on the Security of Temporary Shelters, duels inside such settlements are prohibited, and violators of this clause can be imprisoned for 15 days depending on the seriousness of the offense. Osamu, smirking, states that the punishment can even be the death penalty, after which he asks if Sakuya Makujima agrees to submit to him. The hero's father silently looks at the representative of the army. He understands that the plan of his opponents was originally to provoke him, and then arrest him. Tsuchida, who is standing next to Osamu, smirks. Sakuya realizes that the military man in front of him has no fear of being accused of corruption, and is just trying to send him to jail in the most brazen way. The man, imagining himself in the dungeons, understands that as soon as he is there, the military will be able to endlessly extend his sentence, and even arrange some kind of accident, as a result of which he will disappear. Sakuya imagines what will happen after his death, and realizes that United Guilds, having lost its strongest fighter, will be easily crushed by Tiger's Roar Guild and other hunter organizations. In front of us are Renji Kumagaya and Myatanasaki. Sakuya is trying to understand why the military needed to upset the existing balance. He suggests that some kind of internal struggle is also unfolding within the army leadership. A man, looking up, thinks that he cannot know about the plans of his opponents, but in any case, he should not confess to any crimes. Smiling, he states that Osamu Yujui is wrong, and no duel took place here. Looking at the military man, he declares that he will not confess to any crimes if there is no evidence against him. Osamu, pointing upwards, states that the sword mark is the most indisputable piece of evidence. Sakuya, smiling, says that the military man seems to be joking. Standing in front of his opponents, he states that this may be evidence, but only that he was trying to renovate the building, not to have a duel. The soldier comes close to the man and says that he does not seem to understand something. Smiling, he looks at the head of the clan and declares that he does not decide anything here, and if he, Osamu Yujui, says that he sees evidence of a duel, then no one will be able to doubt it. Grinning impudently, the villain declares that Sakuya lost the moment he decided to come here, and now he must obediently accept his arrest. The man looks at the officer in fright. The hunters behind the guild leader cheer him on, and ask him not to give up. The curly-haired guy, clenching his fist, declares that if these bastards want to fight, then you need to teach them a lesson. Sakuya advises the young man not to get excited. The man, looking at the level 63 assassin, declares that he himself is in the affected area, so his wards will not shoot. Osamu mockingly giggles. The hero's father frowns at the enemy. He understands that he is level 63, and it is always very difficult to stop the assassins, but if he takes Tsuchida hostage, it will give him a good chance. The man in question is frightened behind a shield. Sakuya reaches for his sword, his opponents carefully watching what the guild master is doing. Tsuchida puts a shield in front of him, thinking that he shouldn't be the weak link. A smile appears on the villain's face. He thinks that the agent's defensive skills are not the same as those of other classes, but he can better analyze potential enemy attacks. Sakuya grabs the hilt of his sword, his opponent realizing that at this distance he will be able to block his opponent's sword strike. Tsuchida smirks. He thinks that the sword shield he wields can only stop swords, but if the enemy is armed with this weapon, he can withstand almost any blow. The scoundrel imagines an enemy attack, thinking that he will calmly endure the attack of a level 69 warrior. Sakuya hits the shield. Suchida realizes that the weapon will not be able to cut through his defenses. With his mouth wide open, the bastard demands that Sakuya Mikujima surrender. Osamu, grinning, asks if the United Guild's guild master is capitulating quietly or wants to be sent to jail along with all of his comrades. The officer demands that the man make a decision here and now. Sakuya is lost in thought. Jiro Iwashima tries to get through to his boss. The hero's father grimaces in disgust. His hand rests on the hilt of the sword again. He holds out his weapon forward. Jiro looks at the guild leader in bewilderment. Osamu, grinning disgustingly, states that Sakuya seems to have made a wise decision. The fighters standing behind the deputy head are outraged. One of them shouts that these bastards are taunting them. The other asks why it was necessary to hit the shield if the head is about to surrender. The bearded man demands that everyone shut up, and states that the boss is doing all this to protect them. Jiro remembers Sakuya pulling his sword forward. He realizes that it was a signal. The man knows that when the guild master raises his sword, he needs to get ready, and when he lets go of it, he needs to attack. The bearded man's hands glow. He thinks that his enemies do not know that he and Sakuya have this tactic prepared and well practiced. The United Guild's guild leader drops his weapon. Suchida looks at the man in shock, realizing that the sword has simply disappeared. Sakuya charges. His opponent puts a shield in front of him, thinking that the magic of this object can block any sword attacks. The guild leader's eyes are shining brightly. Suchida smirks, thinking that his shield will calmly block the attack of a hunter even at level 69. It seems to him that Sakuya is a real idiot. Jiro puts both hands forward. Stones are scattered. Suchida peeks out from behind his shield, frightened. The guild master strikes, shattering his enemy's shield to smithereens. Suchida is bleeding from his mouth. The villain realizes that he was attacked not with a sword, but with a hammer. Sakuya, gritting her teeth, puts her hand forward. Osamu smirks, shouting that he knows what the guild master is up to. Standing behind Sakuya, he shouts that if a man touches him even with a finger, he will be executed. Jiro puts his fist forward and mentally orders the soldier to stop. A grate appears in front of the officer, which stops the dagger raised over the head of the guild. Small pebbles are visible near Osamu's face. Suchida, protecting his face with his hands, shouts that Sakuya has gone mad and orders his fighters to kill him. The soldiers open fire. Jiro activates another skill. A low stone wall appears behind Suchida, which takes all the bullets. Sakuya smiles. He realizes that if they can stop their opponents, they will calmly retreat. The man's hand reaches out to the enemy. Suddenly, he disappears right from under his nose. The guild master looks around in bewilderment. Osamu, who is holding some kind of debris in his hands, states that the stone prison that the man's ally created sealed him inside the shadow. The officer holds the shard in his hands. He states that he managed to note the fading magic of the destroyed Suchida shield, and thereby fulfill the conditions for activating the Shadow Trance Assassin skill. We again see the bars that stop the officer. Osamu stands with his hand on his ally's shoulder, declaring that without the hostage, Sakuya has definitely lost. Putting his hand forward, the bastard shouts that it's time to end this circus. Sakuya stares at the enemy in shock. Jiro is also amazed. The soldiers open their mouths. One of them calls out to the director. Osamu wonders why everyone is so surprised. Sora, placing her hands on the shoulders of Osamu and Suchida, states that there is indeed nothing surprising here. The officer's eyes widen in fear. He tries to figure out who is standing behind him, and assumes that it is the reinforcements that Sakuya Mikujima has called. He is surprised that the guy was able to sneak up on the assassin that he is. The officer looks over his shoulder. He has no idea who he sees, but he understands that it is definitely the enemy. The man thinks that the one who strikes first will win, so he must attack himself at all costs. The villain puts his hand on a bottle of purple liquid. Suchida, looking around in fright, realizes that his ally is going to use the deadly poison that Tiger's Roar Guild has prepared in order to defeat the level 90 boss. The man does not understand when the officer managed to steal this bottle. Suchida coughs. Osamu orders to leave immediately. Daggers are visible in front of the officer. A frightened father calls out to his son. Covering his face with his hand, the man realizes that Osamu, this bastard, is ready to destroy everyone with him. The soldiers are horrified to ask what kind of fog it is. Many of them fall to the ground, foaming at the mouth. The order to retreat sounds. Suchida, covering his face with his hand, thinks that he doesn't like it very much, but is comforted by the thought that at least the ally that Sakuya used is also dead. We see someone's hand. The hero grabs the officer by the scruff of the neck. Suchida is amazed. He doesn't believe that the guy can still move, because the poison is strong enough to kill a level 90 boss. Osamu, who has an animalistic horror on his face, looks back. The hero holds both scoundrels tightly by the scruff of the neck. It seems to the officer that this is some kind of monster. The moon shines behind the hero's head. He unclenches his teeth. Daggers fall to the ground. Looking menacingly at Osamu and Suchida, he asks where they are going. The one-eyed scoundrel grits his teeth in anger. In front of us is the figure of a man with a shield and a sword. Suchida thinks that, regardless of profession, each player has 5 parameters, namely intelligence, perception, strength, agility, and physique. A silhouette of a hero is visible above the villain's head. Suchida thinks that if this guy could withstand the poison, then his physique must be at the level of a level 100 player. Sora tells the scoundrel to order his men to lower their weapons. Osamu grits his teeth in rage. He grabs the hero by the arm and uses the shadow spear skill. The officer pushes off the ground. We see his rear. He sits on the hero's shoulder and tries to twist his arm, while he demands that the young man shut up. Suchida realizes that he has been given a chance and can do something while the guy is released from the hold. Next to the villain, a bright mark from the blow is visible. The young man's eyes glow. He throws his two opponents far ahead. Sakuya looks on in amazement. The scoundrels crash into the wall on either side of the young man's father. Sakuya holds out her hands in front of her. He looks at Osamu and Suchida in surprise. Under the military cap you can see the eyes of an officer shaken to the core. Sora notices something to her left. Osamu finds himself behind the hero. He thinks that his opponent is very strong, but is unlikely to be able to react to the shadow trance skill. The officer sticks a dagger into the hero's back. The blade is not able to penetrate the body of a young man. Osamu grits his teeth from the tension. He realizes that this guy's body is hard as steel. The officer tries to pull out his weapon, but is unable to do so. Sora punches her in the jaw. He himself draws the dagger from his back. Blood is pouring from the officer's nose. He cannot believe that he has been thrown away like some kind of puppy, and he understands that he needs to run away. The hero looks into his eyes. Sora grabs the opponent by the head. The guy squeezes the face of the scoundrel. He realizes that he is unable to cope with the young man's quick movements. The defeated enemy lies at the feet of the hero. Jiro and the other hunters look on in shock. Sora walks past armed soldiers. He calmly carries an unconscious officer in his hand. The soldiers look at each other. One of them asks if his comrade wants to do something. He shakes his head. The hero calmly walks forward with a representative of the army in his hand. He tells his father that he must bring home the second scoundrel. Sakuya smiles. 2 guards are standing at the window. It is reported that the case is taking place in the residence of the Mikujima family. The hero's father comes to the table. The wife asks if her husband has finished his work. He answers in the affirmative. Jiro wonders if the scum have confessed to anything. Sakuya, sitting down at the table, declares that he did not manage to knock anything out of them, and they are silent like fish. The guild leader states that none of this matters. As they already know perfectly well what the Tiger's Roar Guild is up to, he orders his subordinates to remain extremely vigilant for at least a few days. Closing his eyes, Sakuya says he wanted to talk about more than just his opponent's plans. Placing his hands on a low table, the man asks his son what he has been through over the past 5 years. The young man sadly says that after seeing the confrontation between Sakuya and his opponents, he realized a lot. Looking at his father, the hero says that 5 years ago he got into a strange kingdom, and all this time he did nothing but kill monsters. He assumes that it was one of the towers, and he was locked in it. The young man tells the people sitting at the table about what happened to him in the tower. Sora states that he was eventually pulled back into this world by the summoner. Sakuya, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, says that there are 16 towers in total. However, none of them are similar to the one his son described. Sora states that it could then be some unknown tower. Jiro, looking to his left, says that if this structure is near the 6th hideout, then they can make it a priority to clear it. The father looks at his son and declares that he is incredibly glad that he is alive. Jiro laughs out loud. He says that happiness is not only in the fact that the guy is alive, but also in the fact that he came back billions of times stronger than all of them combined. The mother puts her hand on her son's hand and declares that the most important thing for her is that her boy is already at home. Raising his left hand, Sakuya says that he will never allow his family to be separated again. The hero looks at his hand. He realizes that his father and mother have suffered all this time no less than he has, and he will never leave them again. The guy, barely noticeably smiling, recalls scenes from his past. A lamp is visible under the ceiling. Sora and his mother notice that he has suddenly gone out. The hero looks up in fright. Sakuya frowns and asks why the lights could be turned off. Jiro reports that according to the weather forecast, heavy rain and gale winds are expected today. The guild leader reasonably notes that he has not heard a single thunderclap yet. Sora, behind whom the blonde's head is visible, thinks that all this is very bad. The bastard chasing the hero, with his mouth wide open, declares that this time the guy will definitely not get away from him. The moon is shining over the house. Sora squints at the blonde man and curses as he thinks about how it all starts again, but he realizes that his pursuer's words have changed from last time. The hero's mother, looking up in displeasure, states that the lights have been turned off again. Sora realizes that his parents do not see his enemy, despite the fact that they have powerful abilities. The blonde looks alarmed. Sora looks to her left in fear. He realizes that the guy has disappeared and tries to understand if the spell has been broken. Then he realizes that the blonde man has simply left his body. He reappears next to the hero, calls him the seed of the abyss, and declares that they have not seen each other for a long time. Sora, looking at this ghost, suggests that he has begun to consider himself a separate person. A blonde man hangs behind the hero smiling. Sora thinks that this character does not seem to have materialized physically yet, and thus the whole thing must be an illusion that he can deal with later. The blonde tries to look into the hero's eyes. He asks why he pretends not to hear him. He assumes that Sora thinks everything that is happening is an illusion, and states that ordinary people are used to deceiving themselves. He covers the hero's eyes with his hands and asks if he really continues to consider all this an illusion. The young man's eyes turn black. He raises his head. Black jets rise up around the guy's face. Sora realizes that she can't see anything, and realizes that this is definitely not an illusion. The hero's parents and Jiro look at him in shock. The mother looks frightened at her smoking son and calls him by name. Sakuya is horrified to ask what is going on with his son's eyes. A woman casts a cleansing spell. Above the hero's head, you can see a system window informing you that the target is not cursed. Sora grits his teeth as he tries to figure out if it was his opponent's physical form. The young man drops to one knee. He realizes that all this is very bad, and the people around him are in danger. The hero grabs the blonde. A black cloud is visible in front of him. The hooded guy, grinning, asks what happened to the hero, and if he is scared. Sakuya tries to shout to his son. He asks if there is an enemy nearby, and states that he does not see anyone. His wife says that she does not notice anything either. Sora, holding the blonde by the neck, calls him a sneaky coward and asks why he continues to chase him. The guy states that he is not mean and not a coward at all, and the hero is very prejudiced against him. Above the blonde's head, characters with glowing eyes are visible. He states that as far as he remembers, he has not yet introduced himself to the hero, after which he reveals that he is from a noble divine race called Asa, and he himself is the god of darkness, and his name is Fatal. Jets of white energy rise around the hero. The blonde declares that the young man has absorbed the black crystal of the divine power of the Asa race, which was not intended for him at all, which was in the abyss and contained the power of darkness. Smiling like a madman, Fatal states that the agents of God are watching the young man, because he left the abyss without asking permission, and these same agents began to gather nearby. The blonde assures that Sora must return to the tower with him if he does not want to die. Jets of black energy are visible in front of the hero. He thinks that he is most likely talking about the Esra, which his mother told him about. Sakuya picks up a sword. He declares that he does not know what is happening and does not see the enemy his son is fighting. However, he must be a very dangerous guy who needs to be killed. The hero's mother stops her husband with a hand gesture and asks him to wait to see what it all turns out to be. Sora, who has completely black eyes, states that as far as he understands, it is possible to defeat even gods, one of whom is Fatal. Holding the enemy at arm's length, he declares that he is not afraid of a pair of Esra. The blonde's eyes emit a bright glow. He angrily shouts that the hero should not be conceited because he defeated him thanks to unthinkable luck. He declares that other Esra are much stronger than him, and at the same time, he himself, without even breaking a sweat, deprived the young man of his sight. Sora asks on what basis he should believe the blonde. He, closing his eyes, laughs loudly. Looking at the hero, he calls him a pathetic nonentity, and declares that he will believe him when blood pours on this land. The hero's eyes are smoking. Black spots are visible next to the young man's face. Sora thinks that he has no reason to trust the blonde, while wondering what he will do if there is any truth in Fatal's words. The young man squeezes the neck of his enemy. A white whirlwind swirls around someone's fingers. Fatal, with a bright light behind him, shouts loudly. The hero realizes that he can see again. He lets go of the blonde, trying to figure out what's going on. The blindfolded man declares that he believes him. Sakuya, smiling, greets Shizenji. Sora looks at the man in surprise and seems to recognize him. In front of him is a monk whom he saw at the entrance to the shelter. The young man asks his father if he knows this man. Sakuya replies that this is not just some unfamiliar guy, but the co-founder of United Guilds. Fatal, who is hanging in the air, curses Shizenji and demands to let him go. The hero asks the monk if he really sees this blonde. Shizenji, removing the blindfold, declares that he must talk to the young man, and very urgently. Sakuya, standing behind his son, asks what is going on here. Shizenji replies that he will explain everything in detail after talking to the guy. The man states that he understands everything. The moon floats between the clouds. Sora and Shizenji are sitting opposite each other. The hero asks why this conversation is so urgent. The monk, pointing to his eyes, states that he is not Esra, but is able to see divine powers, and it is because of this that he was able to use forbidden skills to seal the blonde. We see two vague figures. Shizenji states that the divine power of the hero is of the same nature as that of Fatal. However, it is much greater in the young man than in any other deity. Shizenji says that he has no idea how this power got to the guy, but there is no time to find out, as several deities with incredible power have already infiltrated the city. Electrical discharges are visible outside the window. The monk says that most likely these entities are trying to get the power that the hero possesses. The bald guy, looking at the young man, states that he does not know why the hero had a conflict with Fatal, but this god told the truth. The monk says that Sora should not return to the abyss in any case, as the creatures that live there are much more dangerous than any Esra. Sora silently looks at Shizenji, who states that the hero's enemies will try to trick him and drag him back into the abyss in order to obtain his divine power. The monk suggests that the best way out for the young man is to leave this place and enlist in the army. Raising his right hand, Sora asks if he should really join the people who tried to bomb him. Shizenji, smiling, says that the military has never been smart, but there is one person among them who can be trusted. He states that Esra will not dare to annoy a guy if he is officially listed in the armed forces. The protagonist, looking at his interlocutor, asks what will happen to his parents if he leaves them, and if the monk can guarantee their safety. He states that the guy does not have to worry about anything, since Esra follow an unwritten rule not to get into conflicts with ordinary civilians, and that is why United Guild still continues to exist. Raising his right hand, Shizenji states that while he is here, Esra will think 100 times before doing anything. He states that his Arhut is equal in strength to any Esra. In front of us is the door of the Tiger's Roar Guild meeting room. Hero Ryusei, a level 105 Ares Esra, clenching his fist, states that this mission is completely useless, and he sees no point in sending 4 Esras to catch some guy who doesn't even have a system. A long-haired blonde man tells a young man sitting at the table that, according to the information received, Sakuya Mikujima's son has been absent for several years, and he apparently managed to enter the tower thanks to luck. Shiraya Yahinaju, a level 106 Hades Esra, states that even Hero can handle such a weak opponent alone. He looks aggressively at the blonde and demands that he repeat his words. A hand rests on the shoulder. Dijurim, a level 106 Athena Esra, looks at the young man with displeasure. The man sitting at the table declares that he will also join this operation. Iwaga Haichi, Hermes Esra level 101, asks in surprise. A young man in a tie, folding his hands in front of him, declares that this is his order and a guy named Sora Makujima should be destroyed. He informs that the 16th tower near the 6th shelter will soon be activated, and reminding that there are huge benefits to controlling such structures, says that United Guilds has turned down the offer of Tiger's Roar Guild and plans to take care of this tower on their own. Shiraya wistfully says that as far as he understands, it will be necessary to destroy not only Sora Makujima, but also his parents, who formed United Guilds. Richt Mukai, a level 118 Zeus Esra, strongly states that all these people must be destroyed. The windows are glowing in the house. It is reported that the headquarters of United Guilds is located here. Shuzenji, raising his left hand, says that the decision has been made, and the hero must meet with Officer Miyatanasaki of the High Command. The monk, smiling, declares that this is his old acquaintance, and she will surely protect the young man. The hero's mother frowns at Shuzenji, who states that it is necessary to practice using curses as well. As if war breaks out, even Tiger's Roar Guild will not dare to poke their noses into United Guilds if the members of the organization are protected by the curse formation. The woman, smiling, looks at her son and asks him not to worry, as United Guilds has good reasons to stay in this city and protect it. Sora states that he understands everything. Shuzenji sits in the lotus position at the gate, reportedly 15 minutes later. The leaves of the trees are moving. The monk understands that the enemies are already very close. Jets of black energy are visible in the air. It comes from 4 people who can be seen in the opening of the gate. Resting one hand on the ground, Shuzenji installs the golden bell barrier. Under the ominous streams, the edge of the light sphere is visible. One of the walls of the house is shattered into pieces. The members of the Tiger's Roar Guild look on calmly. The monk, looking at them in fright, realizes that there are 4 Esras in front of him at once. We see someone's legs. Young people bow to the owner of a dark silhouette that can be seen behind them. Mukai silently looks at his opponents. Shuzenji grits his teeth in anger. He realizes that even the head of the hostile guild has shown up here. Zeus Esra addresses Shiraya, who makes it clear that he is listening carefully. The blonde raises his right hand. Jets of black energy swirl around Sakuya. A black hand is visible on the face of the head of United Guilds. The man asks in amazement what is going on. The monk tries to analyze the situation. He realizes that the location of the United Guilds members, including stealthy combat units, has been discovered with the help of the skills of one of the opponents, and the enemies have already penetrated inside, which means that no one will be able to escape. Sakuya, using the search eye skill, sees the names, professions, and levels of all the people around him. Standing next to the monk, the man states that the difference in levels is quite impressive, and this is not a joke at all. Shuzenji, raising his right hand, asks what brought the intruders to this place at such a late hour. Shiraya, looking back at Mukai, states that according to Oni's soul, Sora is not here. Zeus Esra, with his hands in his pockets, asks where he is. The monk asks who he is talking about. He states that he cannot understand what he is without context. Hero, his face contorted with anger, demands that the defiant monk repeat his words. He, taking off the blindfold, declares that it seems that some ignoramuses have come to him. Hero, gritting his teeth in anger, states that if the monk wants to die so much, he will easily grant his wish. The hero's mother sits on her knees inside the magic formation. She sets up a barrier. Jets of black energy creep up on the members of the Tiger's Roar Guild, and the system reports that they are all amazed by the curse of weakness skill used by Yae Makujima. Hero, smiling, clenches his fist. He states that he sees only some pathetic efforts. Smirking, he says that he can crush the entire United Guilds alone, despite the curse that is placed on him by a level 68 character. Shuzenji grabs a daring fist hunter. He looks at his opponent in shock. The monk, smiling, states that Hero does not understand how United Guild's tactics work even at a basic level. The system reports that Ares Esra level 105 has lowered his level to 71 as a result of the curse. Hero looks at his hands in amazement. He can't believe that he has lost more than 30 levels. Looking at him menacingly, the monk states that losing levels is not the saddest thing. The system reports that Shuzenji is a level 75 Arhat. The monk strikes at the block set up by the hunter. The guy flies far back. The rest of the Tiger's Roar Guild are surrounded by jets of black energy, and the system reports that they, too, have lost a significant portion of their levels as a result of the curse. Sakuya calmly asks if his opponents will be able to fight, considering that everyone who enters the curse zone loses 34 levels. Mukai giggles. Smiling, he states that the situation is getting more and more interesting. He calls out to Rim standing behind him. The girl makes it clear that she is listening to her boss. She raises her left hand. Mukai, spreading his arms to the sides, declares that the opponents are in his hands, and Sora Makujima will definitely return here. Sakuya covers her head with her hand. Shuzenji frowns at the members of Tiger's Roar Guild. Behind the monk, a structure resembling the Roman Colosseum can be seen. The system welcomes everyone to Athena's arena. Shuzenji thinks that all this is very bad. Mukai, putting his hands in his pockets, states that he hasn't fought an equal opponent in a very long time, and is looking forward to the upcoming fight. He states that waiting for Sora Makujima seems to be very boring. Mukai looks over his shoulder, his henchman asking what to do with the other members of United Guilds. Zeus Esra has a glowing spear in his hand, declaring that everyone who is here must be destroyed. Soldiers can be seen under the destroyed buildings. A black silhouette appears in the sky. The hero lands in front of Mia. The girl looks at him in amazement. The guy has a sheet of paper in his hand. The guy looks at the photo and realizes that it is Mia Tanasaki. Raising his hands, the young man declares that he is from United Guilds, and has come here to seek protection from the military. The blonde, raising her hand, orders the soldiers to lower their weapons. She says that it seems to be Sora Makujima in front of her. The hero silently looks at her. Placing her hand on her belt, Mia states that she wanted to ask the young man something. In front of us are the walls of the arena. Sakuya, frowning, looks up. A shaft is stuck into the ground. The lights on the columns come on. A girl with purple hair appeals to the gods. Dujurim, closing her eyes, declares that the gods must witness her battle. A bright stream of energy rises above the girl's head. She asks to grant a miracle and direct this duel. A ghostly winged creature appears in front of the members of United Guilds. Sakuya stands with a sword in her hand. Rim, with a blue hemisphere behind it, states that each side will field 5 warriors, and the first team to achieve 3 wins will receive the blessing of Olympus. Hero, smiling, clenches his fist. Rim declares that the losing party. The guy does not let her finish and himself informs that the defeated will be burned by the light of the gods. The young man grins. Ye frowns at the representatives of the opposite side. Sakuya wonders why there should be 5 warriors when there are only 8 people in the arena. Rim states that this is temporary, and the main characters are still on the way. It becomes clear that she is referring to Mukai and the hero. Rubbing the back of his head, he asks who wants to die first. Sakuya receives a notification that Esra hero Ryusei is challenging him to battle. The guild master frowns at the enemy. Shuzenji comes forward and states that all of this happened because he misjudged the situation. Sakuya puts a hand on the monk's shoulder and declares that it is enough for him to have his comrade next to him, and he should not blame himself for anything. He says that thanks to Ye's curse, the level of opponents is reduced, and there are good chances in one-on-one battles. Jiro, raising his hand, states that Ye is not suitable for close-quarters combat, so the 3 of them should bring 3 wins. Sakuya puts her hand on the monk's shoulder. Shuzenji reminds that after Hiro received the title, he single-handedly destroyed a guild that had 3 other Esra. The hunter stands on a mountain of corpses. The monk, looking over his shoulder, declares that he nevertheless has a strategy. He comes forward, asking to be allowed to be the first to take part in the duel. The monk's foot is outside the border of the translucent sphere. In the distance from him, the silhouette of the enemy is visible. Shuzenji, smiling, asks if he can accept the challenge. Hiro, his left eye glowing brightly, stares at the monk silently. A girl hanging in the air tells both fighters to take up their positions and start fighting. Clouds of white energy are visible around Hiro's face. The young man rushes to the attack. Putting his hand forward, he declares that it is time to stop chatting. Ares Esra takes a shot. A trace of his hand is visible in front of the monk's face. Sakuya looks at what's going on inside the blue sphere. Hiro, smiling, asks if his opponent can only run away. Shuzenji grabs his arm. Sakuya raises her fist happily. Energy begins to rise around Hiro's body. Shuzenji looks at his opponent in amazement. His right hand is set back. The monk jumps far back. He squats. Shiraya states that Shuzenji himself got closer, and now he is breaking the distance. The guy suggests that the monk is having a very difficult time. Rim standing in front of him says that Hiro is a very strong fighter. The monk holds hands. Sakuya asks from outside the blue sphere if his ally is okay. Ares Esra smirks. Raising his hand, he asks what his opponent thinks about Fong of Cadmos. Shuzenji recalls holding his opponent's hand. He realizes that we are talking about Hiro's pet. The monk could not even imagine that this snake would inhabit the body of Ares Esra and help him in close combat. Hiro, who has sharp spikes on his body, states that everything is just beginning. He takes off. Grinning predatorily, the guy says that Cadmos is not full yet. Rim takes a punch but misses. Gritting his teeth, Shuzenji looks at his opponent. The dragon clings to the monk's hand. The monster is cursing, looking at the monster. Hiro, standing nearby, clenches his fist. Shuzenji realizes that his opponent has become faster. The monk's eyes glow. He frees his hand from the dragon's mouth using the golden bell barrier skill. He bounces off his opponent. The monk frowns at the enemy, and realizes that it is he himself who has become slower. Shuzenji looks at his hand. The system reports that all parameters are reduced due to the effects of dragon venom. Hiro, holding his wrist, declares that Shizenji is a very good fighter for a monk. The system reports that Fang of Cadmos increases strength and restores health thanks to the blood that the dragon absorbs. Holding on to his shoulder, Ares Esra says that he thinks the monk is not capable of more. Sakuya touches his temple and uses an evaluation skill. He understands that the gap between the opponents will only increase. The man has no idea how his comrade will cope with all this. Hiro rushes to attack his opponent. He throws a knee punch. Grinning, the young man asks how the dragon's venom feels, which spreads all over the enemy's body. The monk blocks away a lot of blows, and Hiro yells that they will see how long Shizenji can last. The latter, lowering his gaze, begins to read a prayer. Hiro rejoices. He shouts that it seems that his opponent has no choice but to utter meaningless words. Rim looks at Shiraya thoughtfully and says that she may be imagining it. However, she notices that the monk is surrounded by divine power. The young man states that this is strange since Shizenji is not even Esra. He does not understand where the monk can get his divine power. Hiro, jumping up, strikes. Blocking the block, the monk repeats his prayer. Sakuya, smiling, states that this simply cannot be. He says that it is a very risky move. However, Shizenji seems to have figured out a way out of this situation. The guild head hopes that they can still win this match. The monk, folding his hands in front of his face, utters words that are unlikely to be understood by the general public. Hiro looks at him in shock. A golden Buddha appears in front of the guy. Shizenji uses the skill Vajra Bodhisattva's 100-syllable mantra. Ares Esra, grinning, states that he doesn't care about the god his opponent is praying to, and asks if he seriously thinks this stupid trick would block his attack. The Buddha emits a bright golden glow around him. The hero is visible in the air above its opponent's head. Clenching his fist, the young man laughs. He calls his enemy an idiot and asks if he is really going to fight in close combat in armor made of divine power. Hiro recalls one of his previous fights. He states that Shizenji is quite brave if he decided to use this stupid plan. The guy thinks that he has already killed one dumbass who decided to try the same trick. The serpent wraps around the young man's opponent, and Hiro remembers that his enemy also thought he could block Fang of Cadmos with divine power, but did not know that this very power is a much better source of energy than even fresh blood. Hiro recalls his enemy flying backwards after a powerful blow. Ares Esra holds his opponent by the neck. Hiro thinks he'll absorb everything Shizenji can give him, just like he did with that idiot. Ares Esra raises his fist to strike at the enemy. He thinks that he is about to plunge him into the depths of despair and kill him. In the next second, he himself misses a powerful blow to the jaw. Not believing what is happening, he flies away from the monk. A deep dent is visible on the young man's face, and Hiro realizes that it seems that his opponent has managed to suppress the snake's venom and restore speed with the help of divine power. The next blow of the monk falls on the stomach of the enemy. Ares Esra is coughing up blood. He realizes that not only the monk's speed has increased, but also his strength and reaction speed. The guy realizes that Shizenji has become more powerful in every way. The monk knees his opponent in the chin, who thinks that Shizenji is the perfect food for Cadmos. The dragon approaches the monk. Smiling happily, Hiro spews curses and shouts that Shizenji is about to be food for his dragon. The monk's face is bewildered. Hiro is seen behind his pet, shouting that the monk's divine power is now his. Ares Esra is jubilant. He thinks he has already won. A mark from a blow is visible on his back. The young man is trying to understand what has just happened. Streams of light energy rise up around him. He realizes that he cannot control the divine power. Thin yellow lines creep across the black silhouette of Hiro. The monk, smiling, asks if his opponent has begun to rejoice early. Shizenji strikes the dragon's head. He shouts that Arhat's power is not so easy to digest. The monk hits the opponent's jaw again, leaving a deep dent in it. Hiro looks at the enemy in fright and shouts that it's simply impossible. He asks if Cadmos really can't use the monk's divine power. With a mocking grin, Shizenji states that he never talked about using divine power. His fist approaches the opponent's face, the monk declaring that Hiro is too naive. A member of the Tiger's Roar Guild flies through the air, performing unimaginable pirouettes. Ye, who is watching with her husband, says that she never understood why the monk decided to become Arhat. The woman says that representatives of this profession not only cannot become Esra, but also limit their abilities only to the use of physical force. She states that karmic energy is incredibly strong, but it is difficult to control, and you need to constantly accumulate piety in order to use it. At the same time, only Zen energy can prevent karmic energy from absorbing its owner completely. Shizenji bandages his arm. Ye says that Ares Esra has absorbed more karmic energy than he can control, so it will be difficult for him to even move now. Folding his hands in front of his face, the monk smiles. He declares that Hiro has done so many bad things that he has no Zen energy left, and that is why he cannot control the karmic energy he has received now. Sakuya happily hugs his wife by the shoulders. He says that he warned his comrades that they could win this duel. Rim wistfully says that she didn't even know there was such a profession. Shiraya, addressing her opponents, advises them not to get too excited, as such cheap tricks will clearly not be enough to win this competition. He warns that United Guild's members should not underestimate Esra. The hand rests on the ground. Clouds of white smoke rise around the hero. The young man puts his hand in his dragon's mouth and says that this creature doesn't seem to have any divine power left to keep it in shape. Ares Esra's eyes burn with a fierce fire. The dragon's head is visible in front of the boy's torso. Hiro yelling that in this case, he will put everything he has on the line. Behind the young man's back, some strange explosion is visible. A red puddle is smoking in front of the monk. Shuzenji covers his mouth with his hand. He thinks that dragon's blood is a very powerful poison. The monk is surrounded by clouds of brown smoke. He looks forward with apprehension. Jiro is surprised to say that he seems to hear the sound of war drums. Sakuya seems to understand what it means. Raising her hand, Hiro addresses the god Ares and declares that he is sacrificing the blood of a poisonous dragon to him. Black dots are visible around Ares Esra's silhouette, and he asks for a spear. A member of the Tiger's Roar Guild has a glowing weapon in his hand. Smiling, the young man declares that he will fight until his body decays. Rim wistfully says that even Esra must make a sacrifice to temporarily use the divine weapon, and that it carries the power of a god and adapts to Esra's fighting style. Shiraya, smiling, states that this is the unbridgeable chasm between ordinary hunters and Esra. He states that Shizenji will now surely lose. Rim looks at his comrade, who is seen inside the blue hemisphere. She says that he offered to sacrifice the poison dragon's blood that Ares himself gave him. She fears that if the gods find out about this deception, they will be furious. However, she thinks that Ares is merciful, and if Hiro wins, he will forgive him. Ares Esra stands with a spear in his hand. Rim thinks that if this guy loses, the punishment from the gods will be the harshest. Shiraya looks at the girl in bewilderment, who realizes that there is nothing to worry about, since an ordinary hunter will never defeat an Esra armed with a divine weapon. Smiling, Hiro raises his hand to strike. Shuzenji looks at his opponent in fear, realizing that he is being forced to fight at close range again. The monk sees a fist flying at him and does not understand where the spear that was in this hand has gone. Shuzenji flies back, thinking that the enemy will not reach him at this distance. A scratch appears on the monk's cheek. Smiling, Hiro gives the command to explode. A powerful explosion occurs behind his opponent. Shuzenji looks at the torn sleeve, thinking about how thankfully his robe has absorbed the damage. He realizes that the spear that was used against him may also have been impregnated with dragon venom. Above the monk's head, there is a systemic message that the blood of Ares has reduced the protective properties of the mantle by 50 points. Hiro approaches the enemy again. The monk barely manages to dodge. 3 red arrows shoot out from Ares Esra's back. Shuzenji understands that he is being attacked not only with his fists, but also with some foreign objects. A lot of fists can be seen in front of Ares Esra. The guy shouts loudly for the monk to try to dodge this attack. Red spikes appear around his arm. Shuzenji tries to dodge these projectiles, realizing that he cannot predict his opponent's movements. The monk grits his teeth in anger, realizing that every hit destroys his defenses. He realizes that his protective equipment is limited by karma, and the result, as they say, is obvious. Hiro punches the monk in the stomach, who realizes that if Ares Esra hadn't been weakened, he would have killed him by now. The monk dodges another blow. He understands that he must keep his distance. Hiro, with his arms outstretched, looms over his opponent. He bounces off and ends up at a fairly decent distance. On the palm of the monk's palm you can see a glowing symbol. It calls for the cleansing of the 3 kingdoms, the clash of factions and the forgiveness of the most heinous sins. Raising his left hand, Ares Esra declares that the monk seems to have reached his limit. A red substance is visible under his feet, and he declares that retreating will not help the cult minister. Raising 2 fingers, the monk casts Silent Law Realm Curse. Hiro looks at his opponent in bewilderment. A magic formation is visible above his head. The young man's eyes glow. The system informs that the Silent Law Realm Curse is a holy spell that cleanses the soul and banishes evil power, reducing the effectiveness of the blood of the poisonous dragon. Drops of sweat roll down Hiro's cheeks, and he realizes that a spell has been used against him to limit his mobility, and he asks the monk if he is going to keep his distance from him. A strange red substance is visible in front of the young man, and Hiro yells that Shizenji is very naive. Sakuya warns that his comrade is in danger. A sharp spike pierces the priest's hat. It becomes clear that the monk only miraculously escaped death. A ghostly woman appears above the head of United Guilds. She states that those who interfere in the course of the duel must be punished. Sakuya is on fire, emitting loud screams. Ye holds out his hands and heals him. The hero's father, looking down, thinks that the fire has gone out. The system reports that his vitality has decreased by 15 points. Hiro, surrounded by jets of red energy, says that if it weren't for outside interference, the monk would be dead by now. Sakuya tries to get back on his feet. Hiro states that whoever interfered with him seems to have already been punished. Shuzenji frowns down. He thinks that the opponent is trying to force him into close combat, and uses blood arrows at a distance, and this is very problematic. The monk folds his hands in front of him in a special way, realizing that if everything goes on like this, he will hold out for 3 minutes at best, so he has no choice. Hiro, looking at his opponent with glowing eyes, urges him not to waste time. Jets of yellow energy rise up around the monk. Ares Esra shouts that his victory is inevitable. Shuzenji closes his eyes. He realizes that he has only one way out left, and he must open Dharma Eye. A swastika is visible in the monk's eyes. Hiro approaches him with a red spear in his hands. The cult's eyes glow. He thinks that Dharma Eye significantly increases speed. However, this effect does not last long, so he must find a weak spot in the opponent's defense as soon as possible. Shuzenji looks at the spear approaching him and realizes that there is not much divine power in it. Thin red lines are visible near the monk's back. He recalls the blood arrows that Hiro used earlier. Shizenji's eyes glow. He knows what he needs to do. Folding his hands in front of him, the monk stops the spear. Hiro is unable to push his weapon any further, and realizes to his horror that his opponent seems to have anticipated his attack. Smiling, Shizenji says that he seems to have figured out what the blood spear is all about. The monk smashes his opponent's weapon, stating that there was nothing special about it. Hiro opens his mouth in shock. He can't believe his eyes. Shiraya, looking at Rim, asks how their enemy managed to block the blow with a weapon that was the thickness of a hair. The girl replies that judging by the eyes, the monk sees everything that is happening. Sakuya and Jiro happily open their mouths. The guild leader declares that an antidote has been found against Ares Esra. The monk, raising his right hand, walks forward. Looking at his limb, he states that a huge amount of evil energy has accumulated in his opponent's body, and therefore he has evil thoughts as well. A glowing sign is visible on his palm. He says that he will purify the thoughts of the young man. Hiro, clenching his fists, shouts that the fact that his opponent anticipates attacks is not scary at all. Magical formations appear in front of the monk's right hand. He declares that he can freely control the blood that has been touched by his divine power. Rim states that the divine power in the blood is not uniform, and since this fluid is very ephemeral, it can easily penetrate enemy defenses. We see splashes of red. Rim states that she is very interested in how the monk will handle this situation. Shizenji puts a protective block in front of it. Hiro happily shouts that his opponent has no way out. Thin red tips are approaching the priest. The man's eyes glow. He uses the Dharma Eye skill. A magical formation with a glowing symbol appears above his opponent. Hiro clenches his teeth and curses. The magic circle is now visible above the monk's head. His opponent cannot understand how Shizenji was able to repel his attack. The priest declares that all beings are immersed in ignorance, bound by passions, follow the wrong path, and gain only endless suffering. Rim, standing behind his ally, shouts loudly for him to watch the monk's eyes, and warns that he sees the movement of divine power. The girl anxiously shouts that all the attacks that Hiro carries out are pointless. Jiro looks excitedly at what's going on in front of his eyes. A ghostly woman reappears upstairs, Jiro saying that she seems to be going to intervene in the course of the battle. The woman looks down sternly at the people underneath her. Looking at Shiraya and Rim, she states that the girl gets the first warning. Jiro indignantly asks why his boss was fined, and in this case, only a warning is issued. Sakuya stops his comrade with a gesture of his hand. Behind the monk's back, his allies are visible. The head of United Guild says that first we need to see who will get victory in this battle. Above the head of the one kneeling hero, a magical formation is visible. The young man, gritting his teeth with anger, shouts that he does not need anyone's help. He looks at the monk with frantic eyes. Behind Shizenji is the figure of a ghostly god, and Hiro is struck by both the sacred form he sees and the sutra his opponent reckets. With his mouth wide open, the guy shouts insults at the monk. Holding out his palm in front of his face, Shizenji says that the sutra he uttered, when incarnated, removes all obstacles and gives peace. In the man's right hand you can see a rosary. He thinks that all monks learn this sutra first. He holds out his palms in front of him, thinking that despite its simplicity, the sutra is not weak. It doubles the power of attack and defense twice with the power of Fudomyo, but it only lasts for 30 seconds, during which time you cannot lose concentration even for a moment. Hiro, gritting his teeth in rage, looks at his opponent. A wave of light energy rises behind the back of a member of the Tiger's Roar Guild. The monk thinks that reading a sutra in the face of the enemy is the highest degree of humiliation of the opponent. Shizenji smiles. Hiro's body begins to gushing blood. Its flows become quite powerful. Rim, looking at his ally, mentally calls him an idiot, as he believes that he should have interrupted the sutra by managing to break the seal. Red lines stretch next to the monk's face. Hiro, surrounded by blood splatters, repeats over and over again that the monk must die. The cult's eyes glow. He thinks that this spell is capable of suppressing the poisoned blood of the dragon, so it takes a huge amount of divine energy to interrupt it. Hiro is kneeling in front of a nearby monk. Shizenji thinks that a surprise attack is useless in front of Dharma Eye, so the opponent cannot even scratch him. The Tiger's Roar Guild member's eyes fill with blood. He continues to demand that the monk die. He curses in his mind, realizing that there are 15 seconds left. Shizenji's eyes glow. He sees the blood in his enemy's eyes and realizes that he is on edge. Hiro slams his fists on the ground. He curses, realizing that he cannot break his enemy's concentration. Above the combatants, a huge figure of an ancient god is visible. Ye, smiling, pronounces the number 9. Shiraya and Rim look very worried. They realize that there are only 6 seconds left. Sakuya smiles. The countdown reaches 3 seconds. The monk says the last words of his mantra. A ghostly deity strikes Hiro with his fist. Ares Esra, with blood gushing out of his mouth, flies back. Powerful jets of light energy rise around the monk. Shizenji stands with his left arm raised. He thinks that somehow he managed to finish off the enemy before Dharma Eye reached its limit. Ghost Girl announces that United Guilds have won the first duel. The monk smiles, his hands folded in front of his face, his allies exuberantly celebrating their victory. Rim holds out his arms in front of him and heals the injured teammate. Looking at him, she asks if he is getting better. A skull is visible above the young man's head. Rim states that Hiro should have tried much better. Above the guy's head, the ghost's legs are visible. 2 deities appear behind him. One of them declares that he is sick of the Colosseum of Athena's hypocrisy. The second blames Hero for losing in such an iconic place. Lowering his gaze, the young man apologizes. One of the deities shouts that he should not say another word, and calls him a loser. Hero opens his mouth. The deities laugh happily, one of them saying that his father asked for a message for Hero, the other adding that this god is very disappointed in the guy. The ghost swings his whip. He declares that it should be an honor for Hero to receive her punishment from him. His comrade declares that the sword of Damocles also wants to participate in the execution. The deity hits the guy on the back with a whip. This is immediately followed by a sword strike. Sakuya scowls that he now understands how the gods feel about their own Esra. Hero lies on the ground. One of the deities declares that he should consider this the last mercy of his father. The second says farewell. Ghosts disappear into thin air. The young man looks up and shouts out Shizenji's name, after which he vows that next time he will kill this person. Sakuya places her hands on her ally's shoulders. Shiraya resolutely takes the lead. He states that unfortunately there will be no next time because right now all the enemies will be burned in the hellfire of Hades. A black shaft appears in the guy's hand. Jets of purple energy rise around Shiraya. Sakuya frowns at the young man. He declares that he will take over this guy. Yae holds a small object in her hands. She asks her husband to take it because he is engaging in battle with a reaper whose power is tied to spirits. She says that it can help. Sakuya, looking at his wife, promises to use her gift for its intended purpose. The system informs her that the item received from Yae Makujima has been added to the inventory. The monk and Jiro wish their boss luck, who promises to return soon. The head of United Guilds is moving forward decisively. The man looks at his opponent appraisingly. He thinks that, like a samurai, he can project the aura of a sword over a long distance. However, it takes time to use this skill. The man understands that the best tactic in fighting his current enemy will be close combat. Yae plans to get closer to Shiraya with flash step. Then he is going to throw quick blows to prevent the opponent from counterattacking. Finally, he wants to find a weak point and hit the opponent with one clean punch. Sakuya stands at a distance from his enemy. He thinks that the tactics he is going to use are straightforward, but promises to be the most effective. The ghostly master of the duel orders the warriors to take up their positions and begin the battle. Thick jets of purple energy stretch towards the head of United Guilds. A man, looking at his opponent, intends to slip between the spirits with the help of flash step and analyze the movements of his opponent. Two bright blue lines are visible in the air. Shiraya is wary. Sakuya appears behind him, and the young man asks if the samurai is only capable of using old-tired tactics. The guild leader strikes, the trail of which is visible in the air. A look of bewilderment appears on his face. The ghostly figure splits into two pieces. Sakuya realizes that he missed. Ghosts fly up to him from behind. The hero's father curses. A powerful vortex is visible in front of Shiraya. Sakuya charges. He approaches his opponent. Shiraya's eyes sparkling, he asks if this is all his enemy is capable of. Sakuya once again slices the enemy in two. A dark vortex is visible in front of the man. Shiraya shouts that it's all useless, and the guild master's attacks won't be able to hit someone who doesn't even have a physical form. Sakuya looks to his left and realizes that the opponent is higher. He cuts it in two once again. Shiraya's upper body grins maliciously. The Tiger's Roar Guild representative yells that he has an endless number of vengeful spirits. In front of Sakuya, many doppelgangers are seen, Shiraya yelling that a man will never destroy them all. The clones surround the head of the guild from all sides. The young man declares that the samurai, who cannot see his enemies, is completely useless. Sakuya frowns at the enemy. He stands with his sword in front of him. The doppelgangers mockingly look into the man's eyes, Shiraya yelling that she won't give him time to charge the sword's aura. The guild master slices the clones apart. A purple flash is visible above the young man's head. Rim states that this is what a fight between Esra and an ordinary person looks like. Hero frowns that the man is just lucky. The girl disagrees with him, stating that if the guy didn't know, samurai very rarely become guild heads. Rim looks warily at someone. Yae stands with a perfectly calm expression on his face. Rim does not take his eyes off the woman. She understands that she is too serene, and most likely, this indicates that the enemies have something hidden up their sleeves. The sword cuts through another ghost. Sakuya stands with one hand on the ground. Shiraya, in front of whom his perfume is visible, says in surprise that he seems to be seeing some new technique. Rim warns his ally of the danger. He seems to notice something. Sakuya uses the 8-step leap skill and finds himself behind the enemy. The man's face can be seen next to the opponent's head. Far below, human figures can be seen, and it is reported that when the 6th shelter was founded, the military and hunters were looking for monster nests together. Mia Tanasaki points the finger at the monster, and it turns out that a mine was found near the 6th shelter, from where monsters were constantly coming out, and it became an object for research. The hunters confidently deal with the monsters. It is reported that at first only weak creatures appeared from there, and everything went well. Soldiers enter the facility. In front of us are Mia and Sakuya. We learn that in the mine itself everything was completely different. Hunters fight many different monsters. It is reported that the types, numbers and levels of monsters shocked researchers, and later it turned out that there was a nest where an entire ecosystem of monsters formed. Glowing mushrooms are visible above people's heads. The party approaches the boss hanging from the ceiling. It is reported that in the deepest part of the cave there was a level 80 spider. Mia runs away in a panic. Sakuya rushes at the enemy. It is reported that there was no way for humans to defeat this monster at the time. However, Sakuya Makujima drew the monster's attention to himself in order to allow all other humans to escape. The guild leader jumps up, raising his sword to strike. No one knows what happened next, but 3 days later, a pitiful cry from a spider swept through the cave. Rails are visible in front of the hunters. The walls of the cave are crumbling. Ye sheds torrents of tears. Sakuya runs out of a collapsing cave. It is reported that this man was able to run between the falling rocks and get to safety, later revealed to have used the 8-step leap skill. We are once again transported to the Colosseum, where the hero's father and Jiraiya are fighting. A man cuts another ghost. It is reported that 8-step leap is a terrifying technique that allows you to make up to 8 consecutive jumps, and each time the speed increases exponentially. The man's eyes are glowing. He thinks that he has already used 3 of his jumps. He stands on his toes, after which he jumps, making the 4th jump. Sakuya flies up to the enemy. Jiraiya looks at his opponent in fear, realizing that they are getting faster. Behind the young man's back, the head of the guild cuts another ghost. Sakuya looks over her shoulder. Making the 5th jump, he flies up to the enemy. A member of Tiger's Roar Guild has a bright impact mark next to his face. The man jumps into the air, bending his legs. He sees the opponent above his head. Taking the sword with both hands, the man makes the 6th jump. Jiraiya holds on to her neck. Sakuya, performing the 7th jump, finds himself behind him. He cuts another double. A ghost is seen behind the man. He thinks that with the power inherited from this hero, he has destroyed all the false spirits, and using the advantage in speed, he will be able to destroy his enemy before he can create new clones. Sakuya bouncing. Opponents cross their weapons. Looking into the eyes of the enemy, Sakuya thinks that, as he expected, he will not be able to generate enough spirits. Being inferior in speed, the man realizes that he will be able to defeat this enemy in close combat. Jiraiya grits her teeth. Sakuya, holding out a sword in front of him, declares that this is the hero's legacy. Rim, watching the duel, states that it is no longer surprising that a man has held the position of guild master for so long without being Esra. She says that he has enough power to compete with other hunter organizations. In front of us is a visual diagram. It is reported that there were many assumptions about how the towers appeared, and the most common theory is that they are the embodiments of human history and mythology that merged into each other. We see 2 ghostly creatures, and we also learn that history and mythology are inseparable, and if the gods symbolize mythology, then heroes exist to represent history. The ghost grabs the hero's father under the arm. It is reported that inheriting a hero and being chosen by the gods are completely different things, and if everyone makes every effort to get the patronage of the god, then the inheritance of the hero is almost always the result of a fateful meeting. The opponents stand opposite each other. Jiraiya calls the hero's father Lucky. Smiling, he asks if Sakuya really thinks she can defeat him in close combat, and declares that a mere mortal's weapon will never be able to defeat Reaper's scythe. The head of the guild looks at his opponent. He thinks that the name of the weapon he is armed with sounds very ominous, but in terms of characteristics it is inferior to the katana that he is armed with. Jiraiya strikes and hits the ground. Sakuya thinks that nevertheless, Reaper's scythe is a divine artifact, so it will be very difficult for an ordinary person to resist it anyway. Jiraiya, smiling, rotates her scythe over her head. The guild master dodges the blow, thinking that if Jiraiya uses the scythe as a normal weapon, confident in the long range, then he will open up large vulnerable areas. The tip of the sword approaches the young man's face. Sakuya, smiling, says that it seems that the gods didn't teach his opponent how to use this weapon properly. Jiraiya, her eyes wide open, curses. The guild leader thrusts his katana into his chest. Smiling, the man says that he planned to use this skill to dodge, but the 8th jump came in handy for his attack. Jiro, throwing up his arms happily, shouts that it's over, but hears that it's too early to rejoice. The bearded man looks to his right. He says with alarm that this is not the end. Jiraiya, whose body is pierced by a sword, giggles. Looking at the enemy, he states that the jubilant expression he just had on his face was incredibly funny, and he can't help but laugh when he thinks back to it. Sakuya looks at his enemy in shock. He doesn't understand what's going on, and how his enemy can continuously create spirits. The young man's fingers are visible on Sakuya's back. Jiraiya asks who told the head of United Guilds that his opponent can only swap places with ghostly bodies. The guy is holding a man's heart in his hand. Sakuya looks at the enemy in shock and realizes that the situation could not be worse. The guild leader flies away from his opponent. He takes a fighting stance. The system reports that the man has been marked with the seal of Hades. Sakuya looks at the enemy angrily. He realizes that he has let his guard down too much, and that Jiraiya has turned into a ghost completely to prevent physical damage to his body. Purple spirits are seen around Jiraiya. He states that if his opponent is marked 4 times, he will transform into a spirit and become his slave. Raising his left hand, he declares that he will not give the enemy a single chance again. A sign is visible on Sakuya's chest. The system says that it is the seal of Hades of the 1st degree, and once it reaches Mark 4, the man will become the spirit of Hades. Above the head of the guild leader, his opponent is visible surrounded by spirits. He understands that if he gets too close, he will get another seal, and if he keeps his distance, he will have to fight a huge number of ghosts. The guild leader grits his teeth in anger. He realizes that he is in an almost hopeless situation. An 8-step leap is still on cooldown, although this skill would be very useful to him now. A pouch appears in the man's hand. Jiraiya, looming over his opponent, calls out to him. Smirking, he states that Sakuya has talent. Stretching out his hand, the young man rushes to attack. He declares that in this case his opponent is ultimately just his next victim, who very soon no one will even remember. Jiraiya smirks down as he thinks that while in his spirit form, he is constantly consuming mana and taking additional damage from magical attacks. But he is not in danger of physical damage at all. Sakuya stabs with his sword. A Tiger's Roar guild member's hand approaches the opponent's shoulder. The sleeve of the guild leader's shirt is torn. With his left arm outstretched, Jiraiya shouts that Sakuya is moving very fast, but he is too soft. The young man strikes with his scythe, the trace of which is visible in front of Sakuya. The hero's father looks at his hand. The system reports that he has received the second seal of Hades. Jiraiya, smirking, shouts that his opponent won't be able to run away from him forever. A purple mark is visible on the man's hand, his enemy declaring that as soon as there are 4 such marks on the enemy's body, his body will burn in hellfire, rot and disintegrate, and the bones will turn to dust. We see both seals that Sakuya has already received. A chain ghost is seen above Jiraiya's head, with the guy stating that eventually the man's soul will be bound and he will turn into his puppet. Gritting his teeth in anger, the guild master looks at his enemy. The left side of the guy's torso dissolves into thin air. Sakuya curses. Jiraiya, once behind him, shouts that he has Revenant Shade. The system informs him that the man is branded with the 3rd seal, and when he receives the next one, he will transform into the spirit of Hades. The guild leader jumps high into the air and lands a punch that hits the enemy, Jiraiya shouting that it's all useless and laughing loudly. A gray broken stripe stretches from the man to his opponent. A member of the Tiger's Roar guild, smiling, looks at the enemy and mentally asks him if he is really going to drain all his mana and force him out of his spirit form. He thinks that none of this will work. The young man thinks that he will be able to stay in this hypostasis for another 3 minutes, and during this time he will probably be able to put the 4th seal. Sakuya gets down on one knee. The enemy's silhouette is not far from him. Jiraiya smiles. He realizes that the guild master is charging the sword aura and is vulnerable to attack. The guy calls his opponent an idiot. A dark figure of the guy is seen behind Sakuya. Jiraiya uses the Revenant Shade skill and shouts that Sakuya Makujima is about to transform into a spirit. Bright electric discharges sparkle around the katana. Jiraiya smirks happily. He realizes that victory is near, as the sword's aura still has a physical form and can't harm him. The outline of a young man is visible above Sakuya's head. He asks in surprise what is going on. Yae, who has a folded red pouch in her hands, says that Jiraiya's powers are related to perfume. She mentally thanks God that the contents of the pouch she gave to her husband were useful. The woman thinks that she prepared all this for such a moment. Jets of white energy rise from the bag. A smile appears on the woman's face. She thinks that the paper that is inside has been soaked in holy water from the sanctuary, dried, and then imbued with divine power through the skills that cleric possesses, so she has the ability to exorcise spirits. Sakuya looks angrily to her left. The opponent's scythe is in close proximity to him. Yae thinks that her gift is most effective in this situation. Rim takes a close look at what is happening. She realizes that Jiraiya has taken countermeasures to counter the samurai, but his opponents have done the same. Yae stands with her fists clenched. Around the hero's father you can see bright traces from his blow. Jiraiya, pointing his finger at the opponent, shouts that it's too late, and the 4th seal is placed on them. Sakuya stares at her arm, which has another mark on it. Jiraiya yells that the fire of hell is already waiting for the man, and soon he will become his puppet. A member of the Tiger's Roar guild, with one leg raised, hangs over his opponent. Sakuya, raising her head, lets out a deafening scream. Waves of energy are visible around it. Jiraiya, looking at his opponent in bewilderment, asks what is going on here. The guild master, frowning, asks if the guy really thought that he could calmly wait for his opponent to turn into a spirit. He rushes to attack, stating that when his flesh is so burning, the task becomes much easier. The man, surrounded by jets of black energy, rushes towards his enemy. Jiraiya, holding out his hand with outstretched fingers, orders his servants to stop the enemy. The guy grits his teeth in rage. He thinks that all this simply cannot be, since he believed that his opponent had already applied all his countermeasures against the spirit form. Jiraiya, judging by the expression in her eyes, notices something unexpected for herself. Bright white lines are visible around Sakuya. Jiraiya yelling that 8-step leap must still be on cooldown. The guild master, leaning one hand on the ground, shouts that Jiraiya realized too late. A bright white flash occurs. Sakuya finds himself behind his opponent. A white vortex is visible around it. The hero's father has bright eyes. He moves swiftly, inflicting many blows. The man shouts that before he turns into a ghost, he will kill his enemy. Sakuya flies up to his opponent from behind. He hits the enemy with his katana. Looking at his opponent, Jiraiya asks if he thinks he can't block a single punch. Sakuya states that if one hit is not enough, he will strike until he kills the bastard. The man puts his weapon forward. His enemy's head is thrown back. The guild leader sheathes the sword back into its scabbard. Jiraiya, who disappears into thin air behind him, admits defeat. Sakuya says that the victory went to him. A bright light is visible behind Jiraiya. The guy screams loudly. Electrical discharges sparkle around Mukai. Looking to his left, the blonde declares that Jiraiya is a real embarrassment to Esra. He demands that someone hurry up and show up here, otherwise the whole thing becomes too boring. Sora sweeps over skyscrapers. Sakuya, sword in hand, stands over the defeated opponent. He shouts that he has won. Jiro happily clenches his fist. Standing next to Shizenji says that it's too early to rejoice, and he really doesn't like all this. The monk states that the dark energy is getting stronger. Jiro asks in surprise. The cult minister says that it is nothing compared to what it used to be. Black jets rise from the body of the defeated Jiraiya. It turns out that the guy is still alive. He tries to protest against what is happening, stating that it should not happen here, not like this, and not again. Sakuya, whose eye we see, notices something. In front of us are sharp claws. The terrifying monster declares that his brother was simply pathetic. The hero's father grabs his sword again. He tries to understand what the hell it is. Shiraya's head is on the ground. The guy asks to give him another chance. The monster, his eyes sparkling, declares that you can't win a battle with cheap tricks. Huge claws grip Shiraya's head. The monster standing in front of Sakuya clenches his fist. He declares that the life of not only Shiraya, but also all of his enemies will be interrupted here and now. The clan leader looks up in fear. He guesses that this is the true form of Hades' Esra. Ye is frightened and asks what kind of monster it is. Mukai, smiling, says that the performance is getting more and more interesting. Above Sakuya's head, a huge figure of a terrifying monster is visible. A human silhouette is visible in the face of this creature. The monster says that the first person it killed after becoming Esra was his own brother. Raising his right hand, the monster declares that it has since lost count of the number of its victims, but after death, they all became its puppets. Sakuya looks at his new opponent in fear, who declares that the man will share the fate of all of the monster's previous enemies. Above the head of the guild leader, a mark from the blow is visible. A first-degree seal of Hades appears on the man's forehead, and he realizes that the counter of these marks has been reset to 0 after Shiraya was defeated. He looks up where the monster is hanging and realizes that 8-step leap is still on cooldown. With his mouth half open, Sakuya looks angrily at the enemy. It seems to him that he has no trump cards left. The man rushes to attack. The feeling he is experiencing now seems familiar to him. He remembers fighting the giant spider and realizes that he felt the same way during that fight. A slam mark is visible above the monster's head, and Sakuya thinks he has nothing left at his disposal. The monster tries to catch up with the armored soldier, who loudly calls for help. Sakuya lies on the ground next to the tracks. His sword is broken. Gritting his teeth in anger, he looks at the enemy, and declares that he cannot surrender until his allies are safe. A giant monster looms over people. Sakuya rushes into the attack with a broken sword, realizing that he may not be in time to help. The man grits his teeth. He understands that he must somehow draw the monster's attention to himself. But this creature is too big and strong, so ordinary attacks will not do anything to it. A spider blocks the way of people. Sakuya thinks that the monster must have some kind of weak point. A man launches a broken sword at the enemy. He sticks himself into the top of the monster's head. The hero's father happily clenches his fist. The spider roars deafeningly. Enraged, the monster rushes after the hero, who teases him, calling him an ugly creature. The spider strikes with one of its limbs. The man flies forward. He falls onto the tracks and bounces off them several times. Sakuya, standing up, looks at the enemy. A giant spider looms over the man. Smiling, Sakuya says that this seems to be all he is capable of. Looking at the fleeing people, the man realizes that he still managed to save several lives. In front of him is the terrifying toothy mouth of a monster. Sakuya thinks that if he could become even a little stronger, then things could be different. Someone asks the person not to give up. Sakuya is amazed. A winged ghost grabs his armpit and runs away from the spider, screaming that he has come here to help. A ghost is seen above Sakuya's head. The man realizes that he barely escaped death. Sakuya looks at his savior. He thinks that he met Karasa Tengu, Crow Tengu, who once taught the martial art to great warriors, and at that moment he realized that not only monsters, but also legendary heroes have descended into this world. Next to the one sitting by the Sakuya cliff stands a ghostly warrior. The man, putting his hand to his chest, thanks for the rescue and asks who is in front of him. The long-nosed character replies that he can be called Crow Tengu. Holding a sword in his hands, he declares that, fulfilling the will of a fallen warrior, he is looking for someone who will be worthy to inherit the Kumajiri, the famous sword that is a real spider menace, and fulfill the will of the former owner of this weapon. A spider is seen above the warrior's head. The man declares that the creature killed by this sword has come back to life and is chasing the owner of this weapon. The monster stabs the ghost in the back. Crow Tengu sticks his blade into the top of the monster's head. He claims that he is able to pierce the head of a spider, but he cannot kill it, and as a result, a vicious circle is formed. Sakuya flies up to the huge monster with a sword in his hands. Crow Tengu says that when he saw the man fighting to protect those he didn't even know, he knew that it would help him get out of this stalemate. Raising his left hand, the ghost says that perhaps Sakuya can kill the monster with him, after which he will take his fallen comrade's sword. The hero's father shakes hands with Crow Tengu. He declares that it will be a great honor for him. Sakuya recalls that after that, Crow Tengu started training him. The man jumps into the air. He recalls that thanks to these trainings, he was able to master heroic legacy. Sakuya lies on the ground with his arms outstretched. He thinks that unfortunately he lacked talent and was unable to inherit everything this warrior had to offer him. A winged ghost, rubbing the back of his head, squats next to a man. Crow Tengu happily clenches his fist. He says that out of the 6 techniques, His student has only been able to master 3, but it will be enough to defeat the spider if they fight this monster together. The allies fight the monster. Sakuya recalls that this battle was brutal. The man moves swiftly from side to side using the 8-step leap technique he learned from the warrior. The man raises his sword over the monster's head. He remembers that he was able to destroy a huge spider. Sakuya stands with a blade in front of a winged ghost. He remembers that Crow Tengu gave him Kumajiri, Homaru, and Jumaru, and he himself made a promise to the warrior by accepting these legendary swords. Holding the blade in his hand, Sakuya says that it was that if he met someone who was more worthy of that sword, he would give up the weapon and send that person to Crow Tengu. A seal is visible on the man's forehead, and Sakuya screams loudly. He fights with many ghosts surrounding him. The man's weapon flows with bright white energy. He thinks that he never considered himself worthy of such a sword. The spirits cannot get close to Sakuya, who draws a circle around himself with his weapon. Dark figures, under which a powerful glow is visible, fly apart. Sakuya stands with her arms out to her sides. A source of bright light can be seen in his palm. The hero's father thinks that, in the end, he had no choice but to take the power offered. The sword that the man is holding glows brightly. Sakuya sheathing it. Looking forward resolutely, he declares that if he dies here, he will not be able to fulfill the promise he made to the man who saved his life. With her mouth wide open, Sakuya lets out a loud battle cry. A bright white circle is visible around it. The man's companions look at the terrible monster towering in front of them. Jiro tries to see if the sword his boss is currently using can defeat this monster. Behind Sakuya, the ghost of Crow Tengu is visible. Rim wistfully says that even a legendary hero is only a human and his weapons will not be able to defeat a god. In front of Sakuya stands a hideous creature. The monster, looking at the opponent, thinks that the sword's aura seems to be starting to frighten it. The monster points a finger at Sakuya and orders all of his warriors to stop him. The ghosts rush to attack. They try to break through the white circle that the guild leader creates around him. The man's eyes glow. He thinks that after the warrior used this legendary sword to kill a spider, this weapon gained the power to suppress evil. The spectral mage opens his mouth wide. He is torn apart next to Sakuya. One of the spirits shoots a bow. An arrow pierces the man's leg. He thinks that although he does not know how strong the effect of his weapon is on the god of the underworld, he is now almost sure that he can handle this enemy. Sakuya clenches her teeth in pain. Spirits are visible behind him. The head of the guild decides to put every last drop of mana into his weapon. The hero's father's eyes shine brightly as he shouts out the name of his weapon. The flow of energy spreading from the man destroys the spirits that were near him. The ghosts open their mouths in horror. However, they also instantly disintegrate. A powerful wave of energy reaches the main monster. He looks intently at his opponent, realizing that this is a very serious opponent. In the monster's right hand, a magical formation is visible. A bright sword mark is visible next to a purple circle. The monster shouts that Sakuya is no match for it anyway. Two different types of energy collide between Sakuya and the monster. A purple magic formation is visible in front of the monster. The creature asks if the guild master really thinks that the weapon of an ordinary human hero can break through his defenses. He promises to turn this stupid hope into ashes. The magic circle emits streams of energy. The monster bares his teeth, trying to understand what terrible sound he hears. Rim covers his ears. So do the guild leader's allies. White shards are visible around the magic formation. The monster opens its mouth wide. In the distance from him, the luminous figure of the hero's father is visible. Sakuya, looking up, says that the blow of his sword can be blocked. However, this does not apply to the sound waves it emits. The monster also grabs his head with his hands. Sakuya, pushing off the ground, rushes forward. He thinks that this sword emits sound waves resembling a roar, which suppress the opponent's movements. The man is seen against the background of the huge body of the monster. He understands that the monster already feels the impact of these sound waves. Sakuya grits his teeth, realizing he's got a chance. A tiny white dot is visible in the monster's eye socket. He cannot believe that he was immobilized with such a simple influence. Sakuya jumps on his opponent's hand, who thinks that it is too early for a stupid person to celebrate victory. The system reports that the duration of the sword's effect has been reduced from 20 seconds to 10 seconds. Sakuya continues to move forward, his opponent thinking that the moment someone is convinced of his victory, he is at his weakest and most vulnerable. The guild master approaches his enemy's head. Looking to his right, he thinks he should move faster. We see the waves spreading. Sakuya continues to push itself. He climbs on the monster's shoulder, realizing that this is the last chance for him and his entire team. The monster's head trembles. Sakuya looks alarmed. He curses in his mind, realizing that the monster has begun to come to his senses. The man flies up to the monster's eye socket. Jiro looks at his friend excitedly. He asks if he will make it in time. The monster, looking at the enemy, declares that he is too late. Sakuya, holding out a sword in front of him, realizes that everything is not going as it should. Horror appears in his eyes. He realizes that they may all die. The monster, whose sharp teeth we see, declares that it's all over. Sakuya flies into the monster's arm. The monster grabs the man with his bony fingers. Squeezing the enemy, the vile creature laughs loudly. She repeats once again that everything is over. Sakuya bends backwards. He hears that he is supposed to become a puppet. The system informs him that he has the second, third, and fourth seals of Hades placed on him. The monster seems to notice something. Energy halos are visible around the guild leader's allies. Ye puts her hands out in front of her. She thinks she can't just stand by and watch what is happening. A ghostly woman appears above the heads of the United Guild's members. Looking at them, she declares that no one is allowed to interfere in the sacred battle. A blue discharge appears above the character's head. The woman raises her head and asks who it is. Hiro and Rim are frightened. They feel some kind of incomprehensible vibration. The girl, looking up, thinks that someone is attacking the barrier from the outside. She cannot believe what is happening, since this barrier was supposed to be guarded by the Overlord. Lightning flashes between the black clouds. A powerful discharge destroys the barrier behind the ghostly woman's back. She looks up frightened. The left side of her face collapses. Rim shouts loudly that the barrier is broken, and as far as she understands, it was the Overlord's lightning that did it. Hiro points his finger up. Sora, breaking through the blue hemisphere, thinks about what he has managed to do, but with great difficulty. Rim realizes that the lightning she just saw can only be controlled by the Overlord. The monster tries to crush Sakuya, but he is protected by the spell's diamond veil and magic shield. Ye, holding out his hands, shouts that the barrier is broken and they must protect the guild master. The woman tells her son that they are counting on him. The young man's right eye glows brightly. The electric discharge it fires hits the monster in the face. The monster raises his clenched fist, spewing curses. He shouts that it doesn't mean anything anyway, since the young man's father has turned into a puppet. The monster holds the man tightly in his hand. A pillar is visible under the hero's feet. Jiro slams the ground and yells for the young man to act. Sora thanks the bearded man. A young man flies up to his father, who is being held by a monster. The monster grabs his right eye. Sora strikes and breaks off the bone arm of the vile creature. The monster, grabbing a stump, shouts that it has just had a limb taken away. A hand still clutching Sakuya falls to the ground. The man's allies look at what is happening in shock. In front of us is the hand of a hero. He grabs his father by the arm and declares that as long as he is here, he will not allow the killing of people dear to him. The young man's eyes glow menacingly. The monster, raising his hands, calls the hero a bastard. Sora, looking at his father, understands that he managed to hold out for a very long time in a fight with an unequal opponent. The young man frowns at the enemy. He thinks that the skeleton is nothing special, and the guy who is outside the barrier and shoots lightning is much more dangerous. The monster falls to the ground in front of the hero and his father. Sora is alarmed. He thinks that among all the people he has met since leaving the abyss, this is the strongest opponent. Mukai states that he is very glad that Sora Mikujima is here. A bright white mark is visible on the boy's back, and he cannot understand the motives behind Mukai's behavior, as the lightning he used did not cause any damage to him. Sora sticks out her left arm to the side. Electrical discharges are visible above his head, and he realizes that it is also very strange that he was able to deal with Mukai's power very easily. Sparks sparkle in the air. Sakuya falls into the hands of his comrades, his son thinking that now is not the time to reflect on Mukai's motives. Looking at the enemy hanging in the air, he realizes that he must first destroy them. A snake is seen above Mukai's head, and he states that he is very amused by what is happening. Sora stands next to Shizenji, Hiro calling out to them. Smiling happily, the bastard says that if the barrier is no longer there, then it means that they no longer have to adhere to some stupid rules. Shizenji folds her hands in front of her face. Hiro rushes at him, offering to have another round of battle. Rim, looking up, states that it's very weird, and Mukai doesn't discourage Hiro's madness. The girl frowns. She guesses that Mukai wants to measure Sora's true strength. Rim has a shield in her hand, and she realizes that she can't just stand by and watch. Looking over her shoulder, the girl asks Wagaya, who is standing behind her, how long he is going to remain in the role of a mere observer. The young man, pulling a bandage over his nose, declares that the girl should worry about herself, and the assassin strikes at the most opportune moment for this. Rim stands with a shield in front of her. She turns to Shiraya and declares that he has only lost one arm, so he can join this battle as well. The skeleton, which has one horn broken, states that it was not necessary to tell him this. The only remaining eye of the monster glows in the eye socket. The skeleton screams that now none of the enemies will escape death. The monster rushes to attack the hero visible somewhere below. Spirits can be seen around Shiraya. Sora, looking back at Jiro, says that she leaves her father and mother to him. The bearded man asks in bewilderment, and then agrees to comply with the request. He slams his fist on the ground. A black gap appears next to it. Behind the hero's back, an object resembling a stone bunker is visible. Sora, smiling faintly, thinks that now he cannot restrain himself, and will kill anyone who dares to raise a hand against people close to him. Shuzenji deflects Hiro's attack, attempting to strike and shouting curses. The young man looks frightened to his right. The hero flies at him feet first, declaring that the first one is already finished. Hiro puts his hands out in front of him. He can't believe that someone can have such insane speed. The guy yells that the hero should not underestimate him. Sora strikes the opponent. He's spreading his arms, flies far back. Hiro flies past the shocked Rim. The girl looks around. She mentally asks if this idiot could not withstand even one blow. Sora asks Shizenji, who is behind him, to take care of the spirits. The monk replies that he understands everything and will do it right. Folding his hands in front of his face, he casts silent Dharma curse and begins to recite the mantra. The energy that the monk emits reaches each of the spirits. Rim silently stands in front of the hero. She rushes to attack, realizing that the ghost Shiraya is using are completely losing to the cult servant. The girl uses the Valkyrie shield skill and throws an object that she has been holding in her hands for a long time at the hero. The young man easily stops him. Rim, who has a sword in her hand, understands that she really does not want to fight such a monster. Sora grabs her hand. The girl realizes that she has no choice anyway. Rim squeezes his hand, and Rim is forced to release her sword. In the next second, the girl misses a powerful blow to the face. Sora hits her opponent in the head with her own shield. The girl's face is covered in blood. She does not understand why her boss has not yet entered this fight. Mukai, hovering high in the air, calls his allies useless freeloaders. Electric discharges flash around him. The guy asks if his comrades have forgotten that they are under the influence of the curse of weakening. Mukai, smiling, states that he dedicates the next blow to his wife Sakuya Makujima. Behind the monk's back, you can see a protective stone structure. Shuzenji looks up in fear. He senses a powerful wave of divine energy and realizes that it is most likely directed against Ye. The monk, taking off the blindfold, thinks that what he is about to do will be reckless, but he sees no other way out. Folding his hands in front of his face, he orders the heavenly eye to open. Shuzenji thinks that with this he will be able to activate Dharma phase in the shortest possible time. Mukai, who is surrounded by lightning, calls the monk an idiot and asks if he really thinks he can finish his prayer like he did in the fight with Hiro. Shuzenji looks up in fear, realizing that everything is very bad. Mukai calls the man an insect and declares that he is about to die. The shiny device emits electrical discharges. The flow of energy rushes to the stone shelter. The heroes look up in fright. A bright electric discharge is visible in front of him. Clouds of white smoke rise above the stones. Sora covers her head with her hands. A hand peeks out from under the stone rubble. It hangs lifeless. The hero looks at her in shock. He realizes that it is his mother's hand and rushes to the collapsed structure. A yellow object is visible next to his head. Sora looks over her shoulder furiously. He beats off a shield flying at him and shouts that no one dares to interfere with him. The young man looks at his fist. He realizes that the strength of the shield has increased significantly. Rem flies up to the guy with his fist raised to strike. She says that she really hopes that the guy felt the power of the last attack. The system reports that the curse of weakness has been dispelled, and the opponent's level has increased from 72 to 106. Sora holds back the girl's fist and realizes that she has incredible strength. Opponents stand opposite each other. The young man looks at his hand in surprise and realizes that he cannot move it. Rim looks into the guy's eyes and states that the curse of weakness has been dispelled, and it only means that his mother is most likely already dead. Sora tosses her far away and demands that she shut up. The hero runs away from the girl. She thinks that the guy has completely lost the desire to fight, and this is very good. With a glowing object in her hand, Rim thinks that a man with a weak will is the perfect prey for her. A bright energy arrow sticks into the hero's back. Streams of light energy burst out of the young man's chest. Rim, looking at the enemy, thinks that her idea worked. Yellow lines twist around the hero. Rim suddenly realizes that he cannot do any damage. Owls appear in the girl's eyes. She uses the search eye skill. Rim sees yellow lines of varying thickness on the dark figure of the hero. It seems to her that all this is impossible, as she sees that the divine energy inside this person is stronger than that of the gods. And most surprisingly, there is something like a black hole inside him that absorbs everything that touches the divine energy and turns it into his own power. Rim's silhouette is visible behind the young man's back. The girl cannot understand what kind of monster is in front of her. At the same time, she realizes that the guy is something like an immature monkey who is not able to properly use the power of the gods. Rim picks up the shield again, and it doesn't seem surprising that Mukai ordered the guy to be killed. Armed with a spear, the girl prepares to attack. She understands that she cannot leave this person alive. The system reports that the attack and defense of the sacred aura has increased by 25%. With her mouth wide open, Rim reaches out to Iwaga and Shiraya, demanding that they share their power with her. The skeleton that the young man runs past declares that now that the curse is gone, he will finally be able to summon his weapon. Iwaga flies up to the young man from behind. Rim realizes that they must kill this young man before he becomes immeasurably stronger. 3 opponents surround the young man from all sides. The girl thinks that if Sora learns to fully control her divine power, he will surpass even the gods. She blocks his way, thinking that she will stop the guy here and now. There are tears in the hero's eyes. He thinks about his mother. We see a woman's hand. The hand is raised. The enemies realize that this woman is still alive. The skeleton uses the soul chain skill. Rim realizes that it is necessary to restrict the movements of the young man. Translucent chains are visible in front of Iwaga. Ye, being under the rubble, stretches out his arm. She waves it weakly. Sora, around whom chains are visible, grabs his mother's hand. A bright flash occurs near his opponents. The skeleton screams that it cannot hold the young man. Stone fragments fly up around the guy. Tears pour from the hero's eyes. He clutches his head and shouts loudly that this simply cannot be. The guy sees his father and mother, as well as Jiro. Clutching his head, he asks what he has done. The mother, tears flowing from her eyes, asks her son to calm down. Pressing her hand to her face, Sora screams that she will never put up with it. The woman asks him not to worry about them, and just run away. Ye tells her son, who has his opponents behind him, that from now on he must become independent and go through this life on his own. She promises to always look after him. Iwaga, looking at the young man's back, realizes that he has a great chance. He rushes to attack. The tip of his weapon approaches the young man's back. Sora looks around furiously. He looks into the eyes of his enemy. The hero strikes. Iwaga looks at the knife, which was made of divine power, and realizes that it has shattered to pieces. Iwaga, whose leg we see, uses the speed-up skill. He finds himself behind Rim. The girl, looking back at him, asks if it's a joke, and if Sora really destroyed the knife with just one blow. Iwaga, standing behind her ally, warns her not to engage in close combat with the hero. Rim stares at the enemy from behind his shield. He, letting out a loud scream, strikes. His fist slams into the shield. Sora grabs the edge of this object. The young man looks at Rim trying to hide from him and promises to kill each of his offenders. Rim is shocked. She realizes that the hero has absorbed the divine power and has become even stronger. The girl puts her hand in front of her to defend herself. Wings are visible behind her back, and she yells at her allies not to use her divine power. Sora raises his fist to strike. Rim realizes that the young man is moving too fast, and she will not be able to dodge. A fist flies to her forehead. Sora hits her opponent and sends her on a long-distance flight. Iwaga looks on in shock. He does not believe that he has encountered such a monster. The hero looks over his shoulder. He flies up to the next enemy. Iwaga is amazed. He can't believe that Sora noticed him. The hero prepares to bring his fist down on the enemy, who realizes that the guy is not only absorbing his divine power, but also seems to not pay attention to the stealth he uses. Someone says loudly that the young man seems to like fighting, but he forgets about something. On the stones lie the father and mother of the young man. A huge skeleton approaches Ye. The vile creature declares that the guy left his mother to fight and should be ashamed of such shameful behavior. Shuzenji stands in the way of the hideous monster, shouting that he will never allow Shiraya to do what he has set out to do. The monk rushes forward. A giant monster delivers a powerful blow. He declares that some pathetic weakling seems to have imagined himself a savior. Sora, in front of whom an Ivorea is seen displaying a block, tries to shout out to the monk. The guy rushes to save his ally. Iwaga, realizing that he escaped death, praises Shiraya for helping him. The hero approaches the skeleton, who thinks that everything is going according to his plan. Sora runs towards her mother, Shiraya, who is visible above his head, using the death flame skill. The hero, cursing his enemy, looks up angrily. A powerful flash occurs in front of the giant monster. Sora stands with his arms apart. Shiraya asks if he managed to block this attack. Flashing his eyes, he states that the guy seems to be able to absorb divine power. The young man covers his mother with his body. The skeleton shouts that in this case, Sora must show how much of this power he can take into himself. Holding out a bony arm in front of him, Shiraya once again uses the death flame skill. Rim, looking up, calls his ally a moron, and asks why he is pumping the enemy with experience points for free. Raising her right hand, the girl says thoughtfully that if divine power and melee combat don't work, then she seems to know what to do. Sora shouts loudly that it's all useless. A powerful white vortex is visible above his head. The guy puts his left hand forward. Sharp stones fly over his mother. Streams of yellow energy are seen around Rim. She shouts that if the divine power cannot hurt the young man, then she will use it to launch stones that have such speed and strength that they hurt more than bullets. She states that even if she cannot kill the hero, she will calmly finish off his dying mother. The scum in female form suggests that the guy tried to stop her. Sora looks at the girl and calls her a beast. Stones fly at the hero. He takes their blows on himself. Rim, laughing disgustingly, shouts that the hero can continue to burn himself. Huge rocks approach the guy. Rim yells that Sora Mikujima should die. The hero makes quick movements, trying to beat off stones flying at him. They hit him in the head and side. Stones rush past his mother. Shedding streams of tears, the woman asks her son to stop protecting her. Without turning to her, the guy shouts that he will never do it. The young man is simply furious. He promises to kill all enemies and declares that he should not live in this world if he cannot even protect his family members. We see a powerful outburst. Someone declares that the sentimental words of the young man moved him to tears. A huge bow is seen next to Mukai. The bastard states that he is actually sick of what he just heard. Mukai stretches out his hand. He declares that the fact that the guy can absorb divine power doesn't mean anything. The scoundrel holds the blade of Atropos. He declares that the hero's useless resistance will end here and now. Mukai prepares to cut the black thread. He says that he has in his hands the relic of the three goddesses, the one that breaks the threads of fate, and, as it happens, the divine power. Scissors cut the thread. In front of the bastard are visible bright waves of energy. He says that if he turns the blade of Atropos into an arrow, it will be completely unstoppable. A bright flash occurs. Raising his right hand above his head, Mukai declares that he will cut the thread of the hero's fate. Shizenji lies on the ground. He looks up, sees bright electrical discharges, and declares that all this is very bad. The monk shouts loudly for Sora to run away. Iwaga, appearing behind him, asks if Shizenji really has time to worry about someone else. The hero stands with his hands spread to the sides. He looks up, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Tears flow from the young man's eyes. His mother calls out to him. Sora looks around. The woman hands him a tiny red pouch. Sobbing, she says that her son should take him. A beam of white energy shoots from the sky to the ground. Ye tells her son that she loves him. Mukai hangs in the air above the Colosseum. The scoundrel sees a systemic message that Zeus has accepted the sacrifice and is very pleased with it. Rim comes out to him. She asks if Sora is really dead. Closing his eyes, Mukai states that Zeus has confirmed that he accepted his sacrifice, after which he says that this is not what they should be worried about now. Mukai, who is towered over by a huge skeleton, informs his allies that what is more important now is that they have actually declared war on all other guilds, and must be ready to wage it. Splashes are visible on the surface of the water. The hero plunges into the depths. Water flows along the bottom of the cave. A guy with a sword on his back pulls the hero by the leg. Sora opens his eyes. He does not believe that he is still alive. The guy sees the fighter's back and tries to understand where he is. Looking up, he mentally calls for his father and mother. Sora remembers her mother's face and realizes that she is most likely dead. The young man's eyes open with horror. He calls his parents. The fighter states that the guy has finally woken up. The hero covers his eyes with his hand. He remembers his promise to protect his father and mother. The young man who pulls the guy's leg declares that an adult man should not cry like a child. Sora, her head raised, looks at him. The young man frowns around. The hero gets up from the ground and says that his new acquaintance seems to have saved him. He asks if he knows where his parents are now, and if they are alive. A guy with a huge scar on his face asks why Sora is so weak if he chose this guy. The fighter states that the young man must accept reality as it is and understand that his parents died because of him. Sora looks down in shock. He grits his teeth in anger. The guy grabs his hand and demands to go with him. The hero tries to break free. He accuses his new acquaintance of lying and shouts that he needs to return. Sora clenches his fist. He repeats his demand to let him go. The young man stops the hero's hand. He realizes that he does not have enough strength to fight with this guy. The blonde, looking angrily at the young man, asks how he dares to shout at him. He strikes and demands that Sora not even think about raising his voice at him. Rubbing his wrist, the young man asks if he should thank his savior so much. Looking at the hero, he declares that he saved his life, but could just as easily have taken it. Sora, holding on to his left side, calls the guy a bastard. He puts his hand on the hilt of his sword and declares that the hero's connection to the divine power was cut with the help of the blade of Atropos. And without a blessing, the hero is just an ordinary person. He asks if the insignificant idiot has realized his current situation. The hero is holding on to his shoulder. The blonde man places his sword in front of him and declares that from now on, they will restore the young man's connection with the divine power that is within him. The young man states that, in addition, Sora will learn how to use it correctly. Stretching out his hand to the hero, the guy asks why he is still sitting on the ground and if he is going to go with him. Sora clenches her fist. He gives his hand to his new acquaintance. Getting back on his feet, he declares that he will go with him. A sword is visible in front of the young man's face. Its owner says that the hero should not mistake it for a good character. Holding his weapon in his hand, the guy says that from now on he will be the enemy of the hero, and he must be very attentive. The young man notices something. In front of Sora and his new acquaintance, you can see a foot and characteristic shoes. The monk, folding his hands in front of his face, declares that until the hero's savior names the one whom he calls the patron of the young man, he will not let the son of his fallen comrade go. Sora recognizes Shizenji. The monk, lowering his head, apologizes for not being able to protect the young man's parents. Shizenji dives into the depths. He informs the hero that the divine power threw them both underground, and he himself barely survived. The monk sinks to the bottom, where the sword is visible. He says that as long as he is alive, he will fulfill the promise he made to the hero's parents. Shizenji declares to the young man who is grabbing his sword that if he plans to use the hero's divine power for his own purposes, he will never forgive him. The young man, smiling, declares that the half-dead priest is pretending to be some kind of mighty warrior. Touching his face with his fingers, Shizenji declares that he is not afraid of death, and clinging to life is shameful in itself. Removing the blindfold, the man says that if he does not fulfill the promise he made to the young man's parents, he will not be able to look them in the eye when he meets them in the afterlife. The young man, without letting go of his sword, states that they can just ask what the hero himself wants. Sora says the name of his comrade. Shizenji looks at him with his mouth half open. Holding his shoulder, the hero declares that he really wants revenge, but now he has no strength. Gritting his teeth, the guy states that if he can fully awaken, then it doesn't matter to him that someone can misuse him in any way, so he will agree to the fighter's offer. Shizenji looks at the hero in shock. Closing his eyes, the monk lowers his head. Raising his right hand, he declares that he understands everything, and if this decision is made deliberately, he will not object. He hands the boy a sword and asks him to take it, stating that it is the last thing his parents left for their son. The hero's eyes widen in amazement. He experiences a very strange feeling. Weapons emit energy that feels familiar to the hero. A glowing galaxy is visible in the boy's chest. He realizes that he feels the power of his parents, and not only her. Shizenji says that this sword has been passed down by heroes from generation to generation, and each of its owners has invested something in it. However, it takes divine power to fully extract all the powers and knowledge, and in its current state, Sora will not be able to use this sword. The hero looks at the weapon in shock, repeating the monk's words that it contains the knowledge of all its previous owners. The monk sadly reports that Ye gave him this sword, saying that one day her son will be able to use it. Shizenji asks him to keep this weapon carefully, after which he asks if the hero realized what exactly he got in his hands. Sora can't take his eyes off the sword. He says that he must wait for the time when he can use it. The guy realizes that his mother has used her foresight skills to look into the future. The young man's savior frowns and asks if he is done with his sentiments. Sora replies in the affirmative. 3 young men are walking through a cave. The hero thinks that he managed to enter a very strange tower and escape from there. Then he met his father and mother, and lost them. A barefoot character sits on a magnificent throne. Sora tries to understand what awaits him in the future. Under the hood, a brightly glowing light is visible. Sora and his companions are walking through the cave. Shuzenji, looking around, states that he could not even imagine that there would be such a gigantic space under the 6th shelter. The young man's savior angrily asks why the monk followed them at all. Folding his hands in front of his face, Shuzenji replies that, of course, in order to protect the son of his fallen comrade. The young man, opening his mouth, asks again in surprise. Pointing his finger at the hero, he states that the man can easily kill a monk, and that he strongly doubts that the cult would be able to protect Sora Makujima if he was attacked. Shuzenji states that of course he can't. The fighter asks in surprise how the monk was going to protect this young man. Shuzenji replies that he is ready to give his life for the guy. He remembers the hero's mother and states that he said that if everyone acted according to her instructions, they would achieve the best result. A powerful explosion occurs behind the monk's back. He declares that everything ended worse than ever. Clenching his fist, Shuzenji says that this is why he decided not to believe the prophecies anymore, and now he trusts only his own understanding. Sora, mouth open, looks at the monk. The hero's savior turns away from his companions and says that he heard the monk's arguments, after which he declares that he still has to obey him during the meeting with the god. Sora looks at the young man in surprise. The hero remembers his mother's face and Shuzenji's words about a better outcome. He realizes that Ye could well consider the optimal scenario that her son would just survive. Sora looks thoughtfully at the sword she received from the monk. Shuzenji states that the so-called god is locked in the cave they are in, after which he asks if this character really has divine power or if it is some kind of imposter. The hero's savior does not even look at the monk. Smiling, he states that they are almost there and promises that upon seeing the god's form, his companions will cast aside all their doubts. Sora replays the words spoken by the young man in her head. The hero holds a sword in his hand. Looking at the guide's back, he asks which god he keeps mentioning. The young man, looking over his shoulder at Sora, declares that the name of this creature should not be pronounced in vain. 3 dark figures approach the huge gate. The savior of the young man says that they can stop useless conversations, since they have already come to the right place. Sora stares at the gate in shock, realizing how huge it is. The conductor touches his hand. Closing his eyes, he declares that he is standing in front of his god with flames in his hand. A faint bluish glow appears above the young man's limb. Connected triangles are visible on the gate. The gate opens. The young man's savior declares that he can enter. He holds out his hand in front of the monk and declares that he will remain there until God allows him to enter. Putting his hand to his mouth, Shuzenji advises the hero to be careful with the cave god. He says that the young man has extraordinary divine power, and the creature he meets can desire it. Sora, looking at the monk, declares that everything is clear to him. The young man standing in front calls the guide to follow him. Shuzenji stands at some distance from the young people. The fighter tells the hero to go inside, as the god of intrigue and flame is already waiting for him. Looking up, Sora mentally repeats the epithet bestowed on him by the god's companion. In front of us is the upper part of the gate. The hero thinks that he does not care at all what god he meets, as well as whether he will attract him to his side or try to use him somehow. The guy is sure that he will dictate the terms himself. The young man pushes the gates apart. It passes through a narrow opening. Sora descends the stairs. Thin circles are visible under his foot. Amazement appears on the young man's face. The monk opens his mouth in shock. He feels an overwhelming wave of divine energy. God sits on a throne. A tiny figure of the hero is visible far below him. Sora looks up, realizing that the size of the creature is huge and fully consistent with people's ideas of gods. The young man stands in front of a giant throne. He realizes that he is facing the Norse god Loki. Sora silently looks at the god. He pays attention to the face of this entity, and realizes that the years have not spared Loki at all. The god's eyes begin to glow. He declares that the hero has finally come. The young man looks at his unusual interlocutor in surprise. Loki has an interest on her face. Looking down at the guy, he states that maintaining such calm at the sight of God is an amazing ability, and he is clearly an unusual person. Sora calmly looks up. Loki asks if the guy wants to avenge his dead family. Raising his right hand, Sora replies that this is the reason he came here. Loki reveals that the young man's connection to the divine power has been severed by a sacred artifact, and if the boy wants to restore it, he will have to pay a price. Sora says that she will give everything to regain her divine power. Raising his right hand, he looks at the god and asks if these are not the words the god of intrigue expected from him. Loki silently looks at the guy. He frowns and asks if this behavior means that he will not be able to pay even if he gives everything he has. Loki, looking at the guy, makes a sound that indicates surprise. Sora emphatically says that he wants more than just divine power, and that he needs ultimate power that can defeat any enemy. Sora stands in front of the god with her arms wide apart. Pointing his finger at Loki, he asks if he can give him what he needs. Loki looks at the hero with displeasure and demands that he not be conceited. Stretching out his hand to him, He asks how a mere mortal can talk to gods so impudently. He grabs the young man in his hand. Smiling, Sora says that Loki created his own follower, who then put a lot of effort into summoning him here, which means that the god needs something from him. Loki looks at the arrogant man he is holding in his hand, who says that he thinks Loki wants to absorb his divine power and revive his fading body. The Scandinavian god clenches his fingers and calls the young man an arrogant boor. Sora, his mouth wide open, shouts that he seems to have guessed right. The god's eyes shine brightly. The hero shouts that this entity can kill him and take away the divine power. Loki's eyes narrow. He declares that the guy is really incredibly cocky. Smiling, Sora says that as far as he understands, the god cannot steal power from him. Loki, looking at the young man, makes a sound that indicates bewilderment. He unclenches his fingers. Closing his eyes, Loki declares that the divine power of the young man really belongs to the Norse gods, but he cannot take it. Sora stretches out her hand to God and says that in this case they are now completely equal. The young man looks up. He always suspected that the power he gained in the abyss was similar to the power of the Norse gods. The interlocutors look at each other in silence. Sora thinks that Loki cannot take away his divine power, and this god, who is the second most important in his pantheon, is no longer so arrogant and is forced to cooperate with a mere mortal. Sticking out a finger in the direction of the hero, Loki declares that the guy is very brave. The hero shakes the god's fingernail and asks if it would be enough if he said he was glad to meet Loki. Narrowing his eyes, the god declares that the guy must remember the myths and fates of those people who have shown disrespect to Loki. Sora, smiling, states that empty threats only destroy the image of a sympathetic entity that these very myths create. The interlocutors look at each other. Loki calls the guy an annoying fly. Putting his hand to his mouth, the god clears his throat. He says that his days are almost numbered. Raising his right hand, he states that he will briefly state what he wants from the young man. Sora realizes that Loki is very weak and without divine power. He is only a flabby shell. The guy thinks that if God offers him an alliance, then he is ready to show goodwill. Sora puts her hand to her chest. He asks what the god of intrigue has in plan. Propping his head on his hand, Loki states that the boy should return to the tower. The young man remembers the events that happened to him in the place just mentioned, and considers the god's proposal. We see some magnificent buildings. Loki says that there are now 16 towers on the planet, each filled with the divine power of a particular god. Loki can see a majestic structure at his fingertips. He explains that the towers of the other Norse gods have also been unlocked, but none of them have ever awakened. Loki says that they cannot allow outsiders to steal their divine power. Raising his hand, the hero asks in surprise why the Scandinavian gods have not awakened. Clenching his fist, Loki angrily shouts that it happened because they were betrayed, but he will tell about it later. But for now, the guy only needs to know the bare essentials. With his mouth wide open, Loki declares that their common enemy is the Greek gods. The sharp nails of the divine essence attract attention. She says that she will give the young man absolute strength capable of crushing any enemy, but the young man will have to make a choice. A fireball is seen in front of Sora. Loki states that the hero can absorb Surtur's flame, which cleanses the divine power and returns it to its original form. The fire is visible in the hero's chest. Loki warns that the guy will have to feed the flames with his own divine power, and if it is depleted, the giant's fire will burn the young man's body to ashes. Sora imagines herself being consumed by a hot flame. A green seed can be seen between the god's fingers. He states that the second option is to plant the seed of the world tree in the guy's body. The hero is entwined with the branches of a plant. Loki reports that as a result of this, the young man's body will turn into an ideal vessel for divine power and allow him to control every particle of it. Sora sits in front of the tombstone. Loki warns that this path is very long. The hero's eyes are shining. He thinks that Surtur's flame is devouring the power of its owner like some kind of parasite, and the seed of the world tree will not make itself felt very soon. Loki reports that there is a third option to choose the first two. We see a powerful tree entwined with flames. The god informs us that in this case, the world tree will grow faster, devouring the pure divine energy created by Surtur's flame, and Surtur's flame, in turn, will reduce the damage done to the body by burning excess branches and leaves of the world tree. Sora holds a fireball and a seed in his hands. Loki states that the third option has too high a price since the guy will meet with Ragnarok, who will personally appear to the soul of the young man. In front of us is a dark figure emitting bright jets of energy. The god warns that as soon as the balance between the flame and the tree is lost, the body of the young man will turn to ashes in the blink of an eye. Squinting, Loki looks at the young man. He asks what choice he will make. Smiling, Sora declares that God has essentially given him no choice. The guy stands with his hands outstretched. He declares that, of course, he will stop at the third option. Loki, laughing loudly, declares that he is fine with this. Sora, gritting his teeth in pain, looks at his hands. He has a feeling that he is about to burn. Markings appear on both of his arms. The young man throws his head back. Loki states that the two forces that repel each other have begun to merge. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, the god declares that he could not even imagine that the last hope of the Norse gods would be a mere mortal. We see tall buildings. Fadl sits on a corpse. Opening his mouth, he looks to his left with great indignation. Clutching his chest, the scoundrel shouts that his divine power is being stolen from him, and that he will not allow the hero to get into the Scandinavian tower. Smiling faces are visible on the ground. The sun rises behind the destroyed houses. Two squads are approaching each other. We see a hand around which electric discharges sparkle. Yet Tanasaki stares at someone angrily. Mukai, smiling, states that the 17th tower seems to have woken up today. The young man resolutely declares that his guild will get it at all costs. Loki's eyes are glowing. Sora holds a plant in one hand and a sword in the other. Shizenji and the hero's savior silently watch what is happening. The fighter, looking up, thinks that this idiot is really planning to combine two completely opposite forces within himself. The monk, opening his mouth, mentally asks the guy to hold on. The eyes of the young man are painted in different colors. He stands with his right arm raised. Sora looks at her upper limbs in bewilderment. The guy notices something. In front of him is an incredibly strange tree. The young man guesses that he is inside his spiritual world. Sora looks up in surprise. He realizes that he sees a tree that has grown from a planted seed and has become truly huge. The hero looks to his right. He notices a green giant sitting with a book in his hands and tries to figure out what kind of creature it is. Sora sees the face of this creature and realizes that it seems to be looking at him. The giant, pointing at the young man, states that there is a very chaotic divine power inside the young man and that he sees the young man's past. Raising his left hand, the green creature declares that the youth's spirit world has been burned to ashes by the flames of wrath. On one of the pages of the book, the hero's parents are visible. The giant states that, like Yggdrasil's messenger, he does not want to see tragedies. When children lose their fathers and mothers, he asks permission to turn the scorched earth of the soul of a young man into flowering meadows. Sora, smiling, states that it doesn't seem to be free at all. Slamming the book in front of him, the giant declares that people call it a mutually beneficial deal. Crossing his arms in front of him, Yggdrasil's messenger asks the young man to choose him as his mentor. Sora asks in surprise. Something is spinning rapidly in the air. Someone is shouting that the guy should not let himself be deceived. On the neck of the giant you can see a mark from the blow. A huge axe is spinning in the air. A ghostly girl cuts off the head of a green titan. A strange creature with flames around it declares that the giant wants to make the guy a slave to Yggdrasil and then use him to turn the human world into food for the world tree. The hand of a huge green creature is visible in the place where its head used to be. Jets of white energy rise up around his body. The giant declares that Sora will never choose a girl as his mentor, as Search's flame will turn everything it touches to ashes. The girl's hair is flying. The giant's head is back in place. The green creature declares that the fire girl knows nothing. Ghostly opponents look into each other's eyes. An entity armed with an axe hangs in the air. It asks if the giant can look into the inner world of this young man. We see a huge green tree. The girl shouts that everything has been burned there, except for a half-rotten piece of wood, which she is talking to now. Ghostly creatures are seen next to each other. The green giant invites a person to make his choice. Sora stands with her hands down. The book appears in the giant's hands again. He asks the hero to first read what he will give him now. A page falls out of the green creature's hand. It falls into the hero's hand. Sora peeks into it and realizes that he is looking at an Esra book. The potential mentors of the young man look at him silently. Sora learns that in order for an ordinary person to become an Esra, they must go through 3 stages. First of all, they need to choose a mentor who carries the will of the gods, then become a candidate for Esra, and finally enter the tower and fight other applicants. People are visible in front of the giant structure. A cloak flutters behind the pumped-up blonde. The hero learns that the winner of the competition becomes Esra, receives divine armor and the right to control the tower. The young man remembers Hero lying on the ground. A sheet from the book informs him that his mentors are constantly watching Esra and punishing him or taking away his divine power if he denigrates the gods. Shiraya, who has turned into a skeleton, pops up in the young man's memory, and the hero learns that the armor he received allows Esra to fight using divine powers. The girl, raising a double-edged axe above her head, calls the green giant a sneaky bastard and shouts that she should have burned him a long time ago. Sora realizes that Search's flame and the world tree are now fighting for the right to become his mentors. Yggdrasil's messenger, raising his left hand, declares that the girl would not have succeeded anyway. The hero realizes that the flames that Ragnarok carries with him, and the very foundation of the world from Norse mythology, are fighting for him. Sora smiles, realizing that an ordinary person would have long ago dropped dead from an overabundance of feelings. Finding himself in such a situation, the would-be mentors look at the young man. The green giant asks which one the guy will choose. Sora states that the ghostly creatures seem to be missing something. The girl looks at the young man in surprise. A bright glow can be seen around the hero's head. He states that both creatures behave as if he was blessed by someone or marked in some other way. The boy's left eye glows menacingly. Sora says that whichever of them he chooses as his mentor would still become something of a slave. Sora stretches out his hands to the giant and the girl. He resolutely declares that they will be the slaves. The guy informs him that they are in his power and must stop behaving like gods. The hero squeezes his recent interlocutors. The girl tries to break free and demands to let her go. Sora sends it straight into her mouth. The next thing to go there is a green creature that no longer looks as gigantic as before. The hero covers his mouth to hold back his burp. The silhouette of a tree is visible in the iris of his eyes. Sora says that starting today, even the gods will be his prey. The young man, whose eyes shine brightly, looks predatorily at the tree. He stretches out his right arm. Loki asks the guy in front of him on one knee who he ultimately chose. God thinks that whoever Esra young man becomes, he will fall into the trap he has prepared. The hero's clothes are torn. Sora shows the symbol on his hand and asks if Loki can see it. The guy jumps off the god's knee and says goodbye to him until the next meeting. Loki, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, tries to understand what this symbol means, Surtur's flame or the world tree. He realizes that he has never seen such a seal before. God understands that the guy has mixed both beings within himself, and this seems simply unthinkable to him. Mie and Mukai are amazed. The system reports that the first candidate for Esra has entered the 17th tower, which has 9 intersecting levels. Drops of sweat run down the face of the scoundrel. He realizes that someone has beaten him to it. Mia is also alarmed. She replays in her head the name of the person she suspects of secretly infiltrating this tower. Hunters and army members rush forward, some shouting that they must fight their way into the tower.